The war is over, and humanity technically won. But looking at the ruins of this city, it doesn't feel like a victory at all. The 6 demon gods who tried to tear the world apart are finally gone, including the very last one, the god of the Sea of Ruin, who lies defeated in the rubble. But the victory came too late. The Sea of Death he created has already swallowed most of the earth, leaving humanity on the brink of total extinction, and our guy Sehun can only curse at the sky in frustration. He sits alone in the middle of a flooded wasteland, a single sword planted in the ground behind him as the waves close in. He wonders why winning feels so much like losing, especially now that even the Tower of Heroes that protected them has crumbled into nothing. The purple waves of the Sea of Ruin keep crashing against the broken roads, relentless and cold. Sehun glares at the water, realizing that killing the demon god didn't stop the sea, it's just rampaging on its own now like a monster without a leash. Suddenly, a voice cuts through the wind. It's Yeom Seonga, the mad dog, looking battered and bloody. Louise Valent, the explosive dog, sneers at him, calling him a liar who's just been faking his way through the fight. Amir Singh, the ice dog, joins in, clutching his head and accusing Sehun of just wanting a free ride while the rest of them did the heavy lifting. Sehun just scoffs, reminding these heroes that they'd all be dead if it wasn't for the gear he personally crafted for them. The tension is thick as Sehun, the last blacksmith, challenges them to another round if they've got a problem with his attitude. The 3 of them glare back, the air sparking with killing intent despite how close to death they actually are. Sehun knows exactly who they are, the 3 dogs, powerful opportunists who didn't care about humanity or the demons. They only ever moved for their own profit, staying in the gray zone and taking whatever they could get. Even though they were selfish bastards, they were the ones who survived until the end and played the biggest role in the war. Sehun stares into the distance, wondering if things would have been different if these guys had just helped out a little sooner. He looks around at the small group, asking the grim question, is anyone even going to make it out of here alive? Seonga collapses to one knee, admitting that his internal organs are completely crushed and he's at his limit. Louise and Amir aren't doing any better. One's cursed and won't stop bleeding, and the other's heart has been pierced. Sehun closes his eyes, the weight of the situation finally sinking in as he realizes they're all at the end of the line. He can't help but throw one last jab, telling them they should have helped sooner instead of just trying to save their own skins. Suddenly, he senses something and snaps his head to the side, his eyes widening in shock. The light fades from the eyes of the 3 dogs as they finally succumb to their wounds, leaving their weapons scattered on the ground. Amir Singh lies face down in the dirt, the life completely gone from him as the world goes silent. Sehun sighs, calling them high maintenance until the very end as he looks at his own bleeding side. He pulls himself up one last time, grabbing his smithing hammer and a broken blade, refusing to die without doing something. A heavy clang echoes over the sound of the rising tide. He stands over the bodies of the heroes he despised, his shadow long against the cracked pavement. He mutters about them not respecting their gear, deciding to use their broken weapons as tombstone markers. He turns away, his face covered in blood and grit, looking like a man who has nothing left to lose. The waves tower over the city like a mountain, and Sehun wonders if it's finally his turn to go. He stands tall against the horizon, telling himself this is the absolute last time he'll ever have to swing his hammer. He looks at his trembling hand, the exhaustion deep in his bones, but there's a spark of magic starting to gather. He clenches his fist over his heart, preparing to activate the one skill that defines his entire existence. Blue electricity surges through his arm as a system window appears. He's extracting a bond from himself. The system struggles to calculate the level of the bond between the creator Lee Sehun and his own soul. A massive, glowing crystal starts to form in his palm, pulsing with an intense, raw energy. This is it. The bond extraction, a process that pulls the very essence of a person into a physical form. His unique skill, Blacksmith of Bonds, creates special ore from those he's connected to, and the potential depends entirely on the target. An angelic, divine silhouette appears in a burst of light, representing the pinnacle of his craft. Usually, when he uses it on himself, he just gets garbage, but this time he finds a colorless ore, a stone that is completely empty. He holds the clear crystal up, realizing it's a blank slate, a vessel for everything he's ever felt. He screams out, telling the stone to take all the regret and pain that's been tormenting him for years. As the Sea of Ruin finally crashes down on him, he begins to hammer the stone with everything he has left. The sound of his hammer hitting the ore rings out louder than the storm, a steady, defiant rhythm against the end of the world. A pillar of blinding light erupts from the forge, tearing through the darkness and reaching for the sky. Sehun looks at the result and sighs. Even at the end, he didn't get some crazy special ability. He holds up a simple, plain dagger, disappointed that even his own life's essence produced something so ordinary looking. He decides right then that he'd rather go out on his own terms than be swept away by the sea. With a look of pure determination, he prepares to end his own journey. He chuckles at the irony. The last thing he did before dying was work at a forge like the crazy blacksmith he is. As he lets go of the blade and falls into the dark water, a sudden realization hits him. The sound of waves he's been hearing since he first learned magic? It wasn't just a sound. It was the Sea of Ruin itself, a fate he'd been hearing his whole life, and he wishes he'd realized it sooner. He thinks back to the three dogs, wishing he'd convinced them to fight alongside him from the very beginning. If he had just worked for others instead of just surviving, maybe the world wouldn't be underwater right now. Suddenly, the system goes haywire. A new message appears. The imagery of armament has manifested. The plain dagger he made starts to glow with a strange, otherworldly light. Multiple system windows overlap, flickering with errors and intense energy. A final notification pops up. Imagery skill Return to Origin is released! Sehun's eyes snap open. Someone is shouting his name, calling him Cadet Lee Sehun and asking what he thinks he's doing. He looks up, confused to see a man with short brown hair yelling at him, a man he hasn't seen in over 3 decades. He looks around and realizes he's in a forge, but not a ruined one. This is the Babel Academy entrance exam from 31 years ago. He stares at his young, unscarred hands, wondering if that Return to Origin skill actually worked. He gulps, realizing the weapon he made from his own bondstone actually sent him back to the very beginning. The assistant gives him a final warning, telling him to get back to work or face the consequences. Professor Kim In-cheol stands there with his arms crossed, threatening to kick Sehun out if he doesn't take the exam seriously. Sehun looks at the hammer in his hand and smiles. Regression, it's actually happening. He stands in a void of blue light, realizing that with his future knowledge, he can start hammering his destiny much earlier. He asks himself if he can really change everything, and then he slams the hammer down with renewed purpose. He decides that nothing else matters except seizing this second chance he's been given. A confident smirk spreads across his face as he looks at the materials in front of him. This time, he's not just going to survive, he's going to protect everything he lost. He vows that, in this life, passing the Babel exam is just the first step, and when he eventually meets the three hounds again, he'll be the one leading the pack. Professor Kim notices a sudden change in the air. Sehun has gone from spaced out to laser-focused in a heartbeat. The professor is startled by the intensity in the kid's eyes. It's not the look of a student, but a master. He watches as Sehun strikes the metal, the sparks flying with every perfectly timed hit. The professor is impressed, every strike is steady, and the ring of the hammer is pure, without a single bit of wasted noise. It's clear to anyone watching that this kid has some seriously solid forging skills. The other students in the hall stop what they're doing, drawn in by the rhythmic sound coming from Sehun's station. The assistant is bug-eyed, looking at the level of finish on the blade Sehun is working on. He can't believe a mere candidate could produce something of this quality all by himself. Professor Kim realizes they've stumbled upon an incredible talent this year, someone who stands head and shoulders above the rest. If Sehun turns in what he has now, he'd pass the exam on the spot without any question. But suddenly, everyone gasps as Sehun raises his hammer and shatters the beautiful blade into pieces. He looks at the shards with a cold smile, muttering that he's still got a long way to go to reach his former glory. He refuses to let trash like that be his calling card as a blacksmith, even if it's just an entrance exam. The assistant loses his mind, screaming at Sehun for breaking a weapon right in front of a professor. Sehun ignores the shouting and calmly looks at the professor, asking if he can remake his assignment from scratch. The assistant tries to shut him down, but Sehun just dismisses him and calls him assistant, which only makes the guy angrier. He tells the assistant to bring him more materials, acting like he's the one in charge of the room. Professor Kim steps in, glaring at the assistant until he agrees to get the materials, since remaking an assignment isn't technically against the rules. Terrified by the professor's gaze, the assistant runs off to grab the supplies as fast as he can. The professor turns to Sehun, warning him that he's taking a massive risk. There are only 40 minutes left in the exam, and starting over now is almost a guaranteed fail. He asks Sehun if he really thinks breaking that high-quality blade was the right move. Sehun doesn't even hesitate, his gaze sharp and unwavering. He tells the professor flat out that he simply cannot turn in something that doesn't meet his standards. Kim In-cheol considers this for a moment, then tells him to go ahead and do his best. Sehun's eyes glow with a golden light as he prepares to show them what a real blacksmith can do. He realizes his current body is weak, short on mana, strength, and time, so he has to be smart about this. He decides to use a high-risk, high-reward method that most people wouldn't even dream of. The other students watch in confusion as Sehun starts doing something completely insane with his forge. He's pouring massive amounts of mana into the ignition stones, and everyone panics, thinking the whole place is about to blow up. Sehun just tells them to watch, his hands glowing as he manipulates the raw energy of the fire. The assistant is terrified, thinking Sehun has finally lost it and is going to kill everyone in the room. A massive burst of rainbow-colored flames erupts from the furnace, engulfing Sehun in a swirl of heat and light. People start screaming for fire extinguishers, convinced that the forge is out of control. The assistant begs the professor to put the fire out immediately, but Kim In-cheol holds him back. The professor tells him to look closer at how the flames are flowing. They aren't wild, they're being perfectly controlled. Sehun stands calmly before the inferno, the light reflecting off his back as he tames the multicolored fire. This is the 5-color flame grind, a legendary technique that uses resonating ignition stones to create extreme heat with very little mana. It requires insane mana control, but it's the most efficient way to forge when you're low on resources. The room goes quiet as the students realize there was no explosion, just a display of absolute mastery. The ingot comes out glowing with an incredible spectrum of light, and the professor realizes exactly what's happening. He sees that Sehun is using the resonance to alter the properties of the metal itself, which will save a ton of time. But even with this shortcut, the professor knows time is still ticking, and the forging process is brutal. He worries that if this is all Sehun has, he still won't finish before the clock hits 0. Sehun just grins, his eyes burning with the same intensity as the furnace. He plunges the metal back into the rainbow flames, the heat shimmering in the air. He pulls it out and begins to strike, his movements a blur of speed and precision. Clang! Clang! The sound is deafening as the hammer falls again and again, the clock counting down the final minutes. Sehun's hand is covered in blood as his young body starts to break under the strain of the high-level technique. He curses his weak body as his mana protection drops, leaving him exposed to the blistering heat. He tells himself that training is his #1 priority after this, but for now, he just has to push through the pain. He can't waste a single second, raising his hammer high even as blood drips onto the floor. The impact sends a shockwave through the room, the metal finally taking its true shape. He pushes himself to the absolute limit, ignoring the sweat stinging his eyes as the 10 minutes remaining call is made. With 3 minutes left, he's refining the edge. With 1 minute left, he's doing the final polish. Stop! The examiner shouts as time finally runs out, and Sehun exhales a long, shaky breath. He clenches his blood-soaked fist, his body trembling from total exhaustion. He did it. A system window confirms the completion of the 5-color flame blade and awards him a new skill, Artisan of Flame. The judgment result pops up. The blade is ranked as high grade, an impossible feat for an entrance exam. The blade is a masterpiece, a curved sword engraved with flames that changes color depending on the mana imbued in it. The other students are speechless, staring at the notification that confirms the weapon's insane quality. Sehun politely asks the professor to check the detailed stats, while the assistant just stands there in total disbelief. The assistant starts celebrating that Sehun passed, but the professor quickly shushes him for being too loud. Cut to Professor Kim In-cheol's office after the exam, where the atmosphere is much more serious. The professor asks Sehun if he's finally satisfied now that he's submitted a sword actually worth looking at. Sehun sits on the couch, looking relaxed, and simply says, "For now, yes." Kim sighs, noting that even after that performance, Sehun still doesn't look fully happy with his work. He gets blunt with Sehun, telling him that Babel Academy might not actually live up to his high standards. He admits that while Babel has a big name, their smithing department hasn't actually produced any good results lately. Sehun just stares back calmly and says he already knows that. In the future, Babel's smithing department is actually shut down for being subpar, and a place called Vulcan Academy takes over. Kim is about to suggest he go elsewhere, but Sehun cuts him off, telling him he's wrong. With a look of absolute confidence, Sehun declares that Vulcan won't be the best, Babel will be, simply because he's the one enrolling in it. The sun sets over the grand spires of Babel Academy, but inside the office the air is thick with a different kind of fire. Sehun looks the professor dead in the eye and tells him he's wrong. The best academy won't be Vulcan. It'll be Babel, simply because he's enrolling in it. Professor Kim is stunned by the pure arrogance, asking Sehun if he really thinks he can take the top spot among the entire faculty. Sehun just gives a casual "of course." The professor leans back, testing him, and asks if our boy even knows how Babel selects the top of faculty for the freshmen. Sehun breaks it down like a pro. Each department picks their top 2, they fight it out in an extra exam, and one ultimate winner is crowned. Babel Academy isn't just one school, it's a massive hierarchy split into 3 primary faculties. You've got the combat faculty, the support faculty, and the technical faculty, which is where the blacksmiths live. It's a world where warriors, mages, and crafters are supposed to work in harmony, but reality is a lot messier. The top of faculty is seen as the absolute peak, a talent acknowledged by everyone as being head and shoulders above the rest. Professor Kim clenches his fists, the scars on his arms a reminder of the hard work that modern alchemic smiths are starting to ignore. He drops the professor act for a second, speaking to Sehun as one blacksmith to another. He bluntly warns our boy that even if he's the best, Babel's smithing department is a sinking ship, and he should save himself by going to Vulcan. He truly believes that leaving is the only way for Sehun to find real success in this industry. Sehun catches on immediately. This guy actually cares about his future more than his own department's reputation. He decides Kim is a decent guy, but repeats his stance: the environment doesn't matter when you're the best. With a confident grin, he reminds Kim that Babel is going to become the top school just because he's walking through the front doors. Professor Kim can't help but smirk. The kid is beyond. For some reason, he doesn't hate the attitude. He looks at Sehun, seeing a spark of something legendary that he hasn't seen in a cadet in decades. He reaches out his hand, offering a silent agreement to see where this path leads. Sehun firmly takes the hand, a solid thud echoing as their palms meet, sealing their new partnership. Suddenly, a system window flashes blue. A bond has been formed with Kim In-cheol, and it's already hit level 1. Sehun doesn't waste a second. He activates his skill to extract a bond stone from the professor right then and there. Blue lightning crackles around Sehun's hand as a warm, brownish ore begins to manifest from the ether. He's pulled out fire-joined iron, a high-grade metal that looks like wood but can store and amplify intense fire mana. Later that night, the city is quiet, but Sehun's mind is racing as he walks back to his humble apartment. He sits on his bed, inspecting the new ore and checking his current status window. The ore is good, but since the bond level is low, the piece he got is tiny, hardly enough for a full weapon. He thinks about how bond extraction literally quantifies a relationship into a material that shouldn't even exist in this world. He holds the glowing stone, realizing this is his secret weapon for catching up to the geniuses of this era. He looks at his stats and winces. Compared to the other high-level Babel students, his physical and mana stats are brutally low. He lets out a long sigh, leaning against the wall, but he's not discouraged. Coming back to the past was the biggest win he could have asked for. He tells himself there's no need to rush. He has the one thing no one else has: time and a plan. He looks up with a sharp gaze, thinking about the Demon Legion bastards he's going to crush in the years to come. He remembers the horror, the monsters that threatened entire stars, and the gods that drove humanity to the brink. To stop them, he knows he needs to secure memory-related skills or weapons fast, so his future knowledge stays sharp. Phase 1 is complete. He's officially a cadet at Babel Academy. But as he thinks about what's next, a sudden ping from the system interrupts his thoughts. His eyes widen as the screen glows with a new, unexpected notification. Reaching Bond Level 1 unlocked a new subskill: Bond Engraving. 1 week passes, and the grand towers of Babel Academy loom over the new students on their first official day. Sehun walks through the halls, grumbling to himself about how confusing the massive layout of this place is. He finally stops in front of a door labeled Smithing Room 3, the place where his next trial begins. He slides the door open, ready to face whatever the faculty throws at him. Inside, he's greeted by 2 men, one sitting at a desk and another standing tall with his arms crossed. The man at the desk taps his pen impatiently, telling Sehun he seems awfully relaxed for someone who's late. This is Michael Barmouth, the vice dean of the Borsippa faculty, and he clearly already has an axe to grind with Sehun. Professor Kim checks his watch and reminds the vice dean that there are still 10 minutes left before the actual exam starts. Michael doesn't care about the clock. He's more interested in criticizing Sehun's attitude before the test even begins. Professor Kim steps in, saying he'll handle the kid's attitude, while Sehun realizes the smithing department is on terrible terms with the higher-ups. Now it makes sense why Kim told him to go to another academy. This place is a political minefield. Sehun glances over at the other student in the room, a blonde kid who's staring at him with pure disdain. The blonde kid narrows his eyes, clearly thinking he's superior in every way to a commoner like Sehun. He gives a fake nice to meet you and turns away immediately, a total snub that makes Sehun chuckle. Our boy just rolls his eyes at the sheer ridiculousness of the situation. Suddenly, the door opens again and a woman walks in, asking if everyone is already there. Sehun turns to look, and the blonde kid stands up straighter, showing some actual respect for once. Michael Barmouth greets her as the department head, and the room suddenly feels much smaller. Sehun's heart skips a beat as he recognizes the woman. She's someone he knows very well from his past life. She walks past him with an air of absolute authority, her presence commanding the entire room. This is Ryun-ha, the faculty head of Borsippa, and a legendary hero who used to be Sehun's regular customer. Sehun is internally screaming. He knew she worked here in the past, but he had no idea she was the actual faculty head. Sehun is sweating a little, trying to reconcile the powerful woman in front of him with the regular customer he knew 30 years later. She sits down at the center of the panel, looking bored and sharp at the same time. Ryun-ha is an S-rank hero known as the Weapon Eater, and her unique skill lets her devour weapons to amplify her own power. Before Sehun regressed, they did business for years, but here, she's just his superior who doesn't know him at all. He remembers her in the future, sitting in the rain, broken and defeated among the rubble of the world. Her last words to him were an apology. She regretted eating his final weapon because it wasn't enough to save them. Sehun had just stood there, looking down at her as the world ended, unable to give her any comfort. The memory of her tears in the rain hits him hard, reminding him why he needs to change the timeline. He shakes off the dark thoughts, focusing on the present where she's still alive and well. He clenches his jaw, determined to make sure she never has to apologize to him ever again. Ryun-ha calls his name, snapping him back to reality and telling him to pay attention. She stands up to explain the rules of the exam, her every move watched by the vice dean and the blonde cadet. The total exam time is 90 minutes, a short window for any serious blacksmith. The task is to craft a weapon that complements the previous exam's theme, the sword. But there's a catch that makes Professor Kim's blood boil. Michael Barmouth holds a ball of mana in his hand, a smug look on his face. He announces that for this exam, they are only allowed to use alchemic smithing, no hammers, just pure mana control. He points to a massive pile of raw ores and says they're free to use whatever they want. The final products will be judged by Ryun-ha and Michael himself, so the pressure is through the roof. Professor Kim shouts for them to begin, and the clock starts ticking immediately. The blonde kid and Sehun share one final glare as the Battle of the Blacksmiths kicks off. Sehun ties his apron, thinking about the irony of being forced to use alchemic smithing, a method he usually finds soulless. Alchemic smithing is all about resonating materials with mana so the elemental energy doesn't go wild. The blonde kid mocks him, asking if he thinks his mana is going to grow just by staring at the rocks. Sehun looks over, genuinely surprised the guy is still talking trash while the timer is running. Professor Kim yells out the blonde kid's name, Hans Barmouth. He tells Hans to keep his mouth shut and focus on the exam instead of insulting other students. Hans bows slightly, apologizing, but Sehun finally realizes who this brat is. Hans is Michael Barmouth's son. No wonder they both have that same I'm better than you face. Hans smirks, realizing Sehun has finally connected the dots about his family status. He thinks it's hilarious that a commoner with low mana is even trying to compete with him. It's a classic setup. On one side, a commoner with zero status. On the other, the heir to a prestigious alchemic house. Hans has enough mana to rival a second-year student, and he thinks the outcome of this exam is already decided. He picks up a high mana crystal, his eyes glowing with confidence as he prepares to show off. The judges note that Hans has picked lazulite and Hainam jade, top-tier materials for water attribute mana. Professor Kim notes that water element mana is incredibly sensitive to heat, making it very tricky to refine properly. Michael Barmouth scoffs, saying that's old talk and that modern alchemic smithing has surpassed those limitations. He brags that Hans can synthesize any ore in just 30 minutes, which is an insane speed for a freshman. Michael looks over at Kim with a predatory smile, knowing he's rigged the exam to favor his son's specific skills. Hans begins the resonance synthesis, a massive magic circle appearing around his workbench as blue energy crackles. The examiners are stunned. At this level, Hans is already performing on the level of an upperclassman. Professor Kim realizes that between the short time limit and the specific rules, Michael Barmouth has set Sehun up to fail. He curses Michael under his breath, realizing the vice dean is even more of a fox than he thought. Ryun-ha watches Sehun closely, her sharp eyes noticing him finally picking his materials. Sehun picks up a clear crystal and a set of red rose-like stones. He walks back to his station, his footsteps steady and calm despite the chaos Hans is causing. Michael identifies the ores, hydrogite and fire red stone, the fire attribute counterparts to what Hans picked. Hans glares over, realizing Sehun deliberately picked ores that contrast with his own. He thinks Sehun is an idiot for picking fire red stone, which is notoriously unstable and hard to control. Hans is convinced that Sehun's low mana will cause the fire red stone to explode the moment he tries to resonate with it. He smiles, thinking this victory is going to be even easier than he expected. Suddenly, a massive surge of heat hits Hans's face, and his eyes pop with shock. The system screen goes wild as Sehun activates Bond Engraving. He's not using his own mana, he's wearing the fire-joined bondstone on his arm to use its power instead. System windows confirm he's equipping the iron on his right arm, bypassing his own physical limitations. Sehun's entire right arm erupts into a pillar of golden flames, shocking everyone in the room. Hans thinks it's just a pointless trick, but then Sehun begins to swirl the fire into a perfect controlled ring. The fire mana from the bond stone begins to resonate with the fire red stones at an incredible speed. Sehun gives a wicked smirk as the flames lick around his fingers. He's completely in control. The room is split, Hans's cold blue water mana on one side and Sehun's roaring golden fire on the other. Michael Barmuth thinks Sehun is being foolish, believing the fire will run wild since Sehun isn't using pure mana. A massive explosion of red light fills the smithing room as the resonance hits its peak. Hans waits for the smoke to clear, expecting to see Sehun's workbench in pieces, but through the flames, he sees Sehun's silhouette, standing perfectly still and unharmed. With one final whoosh, Sehun slams the mana into the material, completing the synthesis in record time. The firepower is so intense that even the judges have to shield their eyes from the blinding light. A glowing, red-wrapped sheath floats in the air, pulsing with the energy of a captured sun. The system confirms the crafting process is complete. Sehun has made a fire-stacked sheath. The examiners are absolutely speechless, their faces pale as they look at the result. The sheath is a rare grade item that stores and amplifies fire mana, a level of quality that shouldn't be possible in 30 minutes. Hans is shaking, unable to comprehend how Sehun finished synthesis that fast. He starts to panic, his own water mana beginning to flicker and spark as his concentration breaks. He asks himself if everything he knew about alchemic smithing was wrong, his confidence crumbling in an instant. Michael Barmuth notices the change in his son's mana, and his eyes go wide with terror. He screams for Hans to stop, realizing the water element stones are about to reach a critical failure point. But it's too late. Hans is caught in a whirlpool of unstable blue lightning as the lazulite rejects his mana. A blinding white light erupts from Hans's workbench, swallowing his vision. The air cracks like glass as the entire synthesis chamber shatters under the pressure. Kaboom! A massive explosion rips through the room, sending smoke and debris everywhere as the rival's hubris finally blows up in his face. The afternoon sun hits the Babel exam hall, but the atmosphere inside is anything but warm. Debris and shattered magic stones are scattered everywhere following Hans's epic fail of an explosion. Hans looks like a total mess, his hair singed and his pride in pieces, while our boy Sehun stands there looking completely unfazed. Professor Kim sighs, rubbing his head as he realizes the usual ranking process just got thrown out the window. He mutters that the situation is unfortunate, but he's really just annoyed at the mess the Barmuth kid made. Hans is trembling, clutching his arm and staring at the floor in absolute shame. It's a forfeit loss without him even getting to finish his weapon, and the kid knows his reputation is tanked. Suddenly, Vice Dean Michael stands up, fixing his tie and acting like the concerned father, suggesting they just void the whole test because of the injury. Professor Kim isn't having it, pointing out that they can't just scrap a finished exam because Hans was careless with his own mana. Michael glares at Kim, accusing him of caring more about results than a student's well-being, the ultimate gaslighting move. He starts power walking towards Sehun, claiming that the academic world record for resonance is 5 minutes. He points a finger at Sehun, shouting that it's impossible for a brand new student to pull off instant resonance unless he's cheating. Sehun just stares back, thinking to himself that alchemic smithing was originally made for when you can't use a hammer. In his head, he knows that true alchemy isn't about forcing the ore to change, but syncing with its soul. The modern way Hans uses is basically trying to kill the ore, while Sehun's future tech method draws out the material's life. He knows this method will become the world standard in a few years, but right now, it looks like pure magic to these guys. He decides there's no point explaining 4D chess to a guy playing checkers, so he just tells the Vice Dean he has no idea what he's talking about. Michael smirks, thinking he's caught Sehun in a lie since the kid can't explain his own genius. He sneers at the fire-stacked sheath, saying there's no way a commoner with zero backing could make a rare-grade item. He demands to know what Sehun really is, practically vibrating with rage. "He's right!" a voice cuts through the room. Everyone turns as Ryu and Ha stands up, her shadow looming over the desks. Michael thinks he's won, grinning as he waits for the faculty head to disqualify Sehun and call for a retest. But as she walks toward the workbench, the air in the room suddenly gets heavy and cold. She ignores Michael completely, her eyes locked onto the sheath Sehun just crafted. She reaches out and touches the wood, her fingers tracing the fire-infused patterns with a strange intensity. She whispers that it's ridiculous, and for a second, Sehun thinks she might actually be onto him. Suddenly, her face changes completely. She looks at Sehun with wide, hungry eyes, and even drool starts dripping from her mouth. She begs Sehun for just one bite, or even just to let her lick the weapon once. The Vice Dean and Professor Kim are absolutely floored, their jaws hitting the floor at her bizarre behavior. The whole room goes silent, a total what the hell moment as the legendary S-rank hero geeks out over a sheath. Later that afternoon, the sun sets over the city and the tension of the exam starts to fade. Sehun walks through downtown, hands in his pockets, finally taking a breath after the madness. He looks back at his work, thinking the sheath was okay, but the fine-tuning was still a bit rough for his taste. He closes his eyes, remembering the feel of the mana, knowing he can do better next time. He chuckles to himself, realizing that even if the weapon wasn't perfect, watching the Vice Dean's face turn purple with rage was worth it. But then he pauses, the name Barmuth echoing in his mind as a nagging memory starts to surface. He squeezes his eyes shut, trying to pull a specific detail from his past life's chaotic end. He remembers a conversation with Louise Vallant, the explosive dog who was always bitter about her faulty gear. She had told him about a blacksmith at Babel who sold her cheap, unstable weapons that eventually exploded and left her scarred for life. The memory of her rage and the cybernetic plates on her face hits him like a truck. The realization clicks. Hans Barmuth was the one who ruined her. He was the hack who created a rabid dog out of a hero. Sehun realizes that if he keeps Hans from ever gaining influence, he might be able to save Louise from her tragic fate entirely. A sharp, predatory smile crosses his face. He's found a new way to break the bad timeline. He looks out over the city at sunset, feeling more determined than ever to keep the Barmuth family from running wild. Meanwhile, back at the academy, the Borsippa faculty meeting room is about to explode into a different kind of war. Professors from other departments are freaking out, asking Ryu-ha if she's actually serious about her latest decision. She sits at the head of the table, stone-faced, asking them if they're really planning to oppose her. One of the professors stammers, trying to frame his advice as anything but an insult to her authority. Another guy smirks, patronizing her by saying she's new to the position and doesn't understand the academy's delicate balance. Ryu-ha's eyes narrow, her patience for these old men hitting absolute zero. The table is a sea of grumbling professors, all of them worried that choosing a commoner like Sehun will upset the high-ranking families. Professor Kim stands up to defend Sehun, telling them they only hate the idea because they haven't seen the incredible synergy of the kids' work. The other professors just push up their glasses and look at their papers, refusing to acknowledge real talent over politics. Ryu-ha leans forward, noting that the weapon Sehun made was probably only at 60% of what he's actually capable of. She gets a small, dangerous smile on her face as she prepares to drop a bombshell on the committee. She tells them they're going to watch Sehun's public top-of-faculty demonstration, and if they still don't like it, K-Thum! She slams her hands on the table, declaring that if they can't accept his genius after that, she'll resign from her position entirely. Over 50 years ago, the Hero Tower descended from the heavens to force humanity's evolution, a literal lighthouse in the dark. But for every light, there's a shadow. The Demon Legion emerged from the depths, corrupting everything they touched. Babel was built right in the middle of that conflict, rising out of the Pacific Ocean as the largest hero academy in history. It's the birthplace of legends, including the ascended emperor himself, Ludwig Schubert, who stands before the new students now. He looks out over the crowd of hopeful cadets, telling them it's their duty to become the next generation of protectors. Sehun stands in the crowd, watching the legendary old man from a distance, feeling the weight of the moment. The emperor looks like a kind, wise grandfather, but Sehun knows that in reality he's a beast who shouldn't be underestimated. Our boy grips his sword hilt, thinking that while the emperor looks nice, he knows the nice guys are usually the most dangerous. The announcer takes the stage, shouting into the mic that it's finally time for the performances from the year's top freshmen. The top cadets from each faculty are called up, and Sehun starts walking toward the center of the massive arena. He thinks about how in his last life he always hated people who strutted around just because they were top of faculty at an academy. But now, he's the one standing under the spotlight as the crowd roars with excitement. He gives a little smirk, realizing that being the one everyone is looking at actually feels pretty good for a change. The announcer introduces the target for today's demonstration, and the crowd goes silent as a massive gate opens. Out steps the Automaton Model No. 9, a high-tech combat golem built for pure destruction. This thing is built to spar on equal footing with a C-rank hero, making it a lethal opponent for any freshman. Sehun analyzes it instantly, noticing it has no special armaments and is built strictly for close-range combat. The announcer screams that the combat faculty is up first, and the energy in the stadium hits a fever pitch. Jake Myers steps forward, looking incredibly bored as he faces down the metal monster. The arena is a massive, open circle, making Jake look tiny compared to the towering automaton. The two opponents square off, the crowd leaning forward in their seats to see the first clash. Sehun remembers Jake's reputation. He's the weirdo from a famous sword family who abandoned his blade to become a brawler. Jake cracks his knuckles and takes a fighting stance, a cocky grin on his face. The automaton's red eye sensor flashes to life, locking onto its target with mechanical precision. Phi HT! the announcer yells, and the battle begins in a blur of motion. The golem lunges forward, but Jake is faster, sliding under its massive arm with zero effort. He dodges a crushing blow that shatters the stone floor where he was standing just a millisecond ago. Jake weaves through the automaton's attacks like he's dancing, his movements fluid and perfectly timed. He sweeps his leg, testing the golem's balance while keeping his eyes locked on its core. His eyes flash with golden energy as he finds an opening, his grin getting even wider. "My turn," he mutters, and then he launches himself forward like a rocket. The golem tries to guard, but it's too slow to react to the raw speed of a top combat student. Jake winds up a massive punch, his fist glowing with a concentrated mana that feels like a physical weight. Boom! He connects right with the golem's chest, the impact sending a shockwave through the entire stadium. The other students in the crowd are stunned, unable to believe a freshman could pack that much power. He follows up with a flurry of strikes, his fists hitting the metal like rapid-fire cannonballs. Sehun watches closely, remembering that Jake was supposed to die young as an A-rank hero in the original timeline. The kid is a total beast. He finishes the combo with a roundhouse kick that sends the golem flying backward. Sehun wonders how a talent this insane ended up stuck at A-rank. There's clearly more to Jake's story than he knows. Jake stands over the smoking wreckage, looking completely satisfied with his performance. The automaton is completely totaled, its metal casing crushed and sparked by Jake's mana. The golem's head rolls across the floor like a piece of trash, and the crowd goes absolutely wild. The head comes to a stop with a metallic clack, a grim reminder of Jake's lethal power. Jake just wipes sweat from his forehead, laughing and acting like he just finished a light jog. The announcer is stammering, struggling to find the words to describe how Jake just obliterated a C-rank threat in seconds. He finally screams that it was an absolutely incredible performance, calling Jake the pride of the combat faculty. Jake waves to the cheering crowd, soaking up every bit of the attention like the star he is. Sehun sighs, thinking Jake set the bar way too high for everyone else who has to follow him. Next up is the support faculty. The announcer shouts, "Cadet Ino Erica." Sehun watches her walk out, knowing that despite being in the support department, Erica is more dangerous than most combatants. Erica Ino comes from one of Japan's 3 great houses, a family steeped in ancient mystical power. In the future, she's an S-rank hero who wields a myth-grade weapon, a level of power that few humans ever reach. But Sehun also remembers her tragic end. She falls into demonic corruption and has to be put down by her own family. He decides it's best to keep his distance from her, knowing that getting too close to someone destined for corruption is a bad idea. As she passes him, her cold gaze briefly meets his, and Sehun wonders if she just sensed something about him. She walks toward the center of the arena, carrying a small, ornate birdcage that looks completely out of place in a combat trial. For her demonstration, the faculty has reinforced the golem with extra armor, making it 50% tougher than the one Jake fought. They want to see if her support abilities can actually break through top-tier defenses. Erika stands before the massive armored golem, her small frame looking even more fragile against the steel titan. She slowly reaches for the cage, her aura starting to darken the air around her feet. Her eye glows with a piercing blue light as she gives a simple one-word command, "Go." A massive black crow erupts from the cage, its screeching cry echoing through the entire stadium like a death knell. The crow is huge, its wingspan casting a shadow over the entire combat area as it circles the golem. The armored automaton tracks the bird, preparing its defense for an aerial strike. Sehun narrows his eyes, realizing that's not just a bird, it's a condensed mass of shadow and demonic mana. The crow flies high into the air, silhouetted against the sun like a dark omen. The golem raises its shields, shifting into its maximum defensive stance. Sehun thinks to himself that breaking through that much armor will be nearly impossible for a familiar type skill. A massive magic circle appears in the sky as the crow begins its dive, gathering blue shadow energy around its beak. It looks like a dark comet streaking down from the heavens, pulsing with a terrifying power. With a sharp ping, the crow hits the target at Mach speed. Crack! The impact doesn't just dent the armor, it shatters the air around it, creating a shockwave of dark energy. Sehun's eyes widen in genuine shock as he sees the result of the strike. The reinforced golem has a massive glowing hole right through its center, the bird literally punched through a foot of steel. The golem stands there for a second, sparks flying from its core before its entire body begins to crumble. It falls to the ground with a heavy thud, completely neutralized by a single attack. Erica stands calmly as the crow returns to her, perching on her finger as the blue flames of its energy fade away. The stadium is dead silent for a heartbeat before erupting into the loudest cheers of the day. Sehun realizes the crowd is absolutely obsessed with her, and just walking out and showing his weapon isn't going to be enough. The announcer shouts his name. Lastly, the technical faculty top, Cadet Lee Sehun. Our boy steps out, knowing he has to do something legendary to top those two monsters. The announcer's voice echoes through the massive arena, calling up the top student of the technical faculty, Cadet Lee Sehun, for his grand demonstration. High in the VIP seats, Headmaster Ludwig watches with a calm interest, noting how impressive the freshman tops have been this year. Sitting nearby is the fierce Ryuin Ha, the faculty head, who looks on with a stoic expression, though everyone knows she's got her eyes fixed on Sehun's talent. The crowd is absolutely losing it, with students cheering and wondering if this blacksmith can actually top the insane displays of the combat and support cadets. Sehun steps onto the sands of the arena, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword with a cold, focused intensity that hushes the crowd. Floating digital displays show off his gear, a high-grade 5-color flame blade and a rare-grade fire-stacked sheath, a combination that shouldn't be possible for a freshman. The other students are buzzing in disbelief, shocked that a smithing student already produced a rare-grade weapon, though some think it looks a bit too plain to be flashy. Down in the stands, the Vice Dean Michael Barmuth watches with a sinister smirk, convinced that whatever Sehun tries will fail to impress the Emperor. He's already dreaming of taking the faculty head seat for himself, thinking that heaven is finally on his side to ruin Sehun's reputation. But Ryuin Ha just stares down at the field, her sharp red eyes seeing right through the surface. She knows something big is coming. The announcer starts to bring out a D-rank combat robot for the demo, but Sehun cuts him off with a blunt no, stopping the event in its tracks. He looks over his shoulder and demands they bring out the much stronger model number 8 and tells them to put heavy armor on it. The announcer is sweating bullets, completely caught off guard by the MC's insane request. Model 8 is a beast that can tank hits from B-rank heroes, and adding armor on top makes it an absolute fortress. It's practically suicide for a student. The announcer tries to backpedal, worried Sehun is going to ruin the entire ceremony with a failed stunt. But suddenly, a heavy footstep thuds onto the arena floor as a familiar voice tells them to do it. Professor Kim walks out with the massive armored automaton, surprising everyone by supporting his students' wild demand. The crowd watches in a tense silence as the massive hunk of metal faces off against our boy, who looks tiny compared to the armored giant. Sehun stands his ground, his eyes fixed on the target, not showing a single hint of fear or doubt. Professor Kim gives a knowing smirk, crossing his arms and waiting for the fireworks to start. He gives Sehun the green light, telling him to go ahead and raise some hell. The announcer finally gives up and raises his hand, signaling the start of the most lopsided match anyone's ever seen. The crowd roars as the signal is given. It's time for Sehun to prove he belongs at the top. Professor Kim stays close, watching his students' every move with the pride of a mentor. Up in the stands, Ryuin Ha leans forward, her intensity growing as she prepares to witness the last blacksmith's true power. Sehun looks up, a sharp, confident smile playing on his lips as he prepares to meet everyone's expectations. He slides into a low stance, his movements smooth and practiced as mana begins to swirl around him. With a sudden burst, the 5-color flame blade erupts into a chaotic swirl of rainbow-colored fire. He charges forward like a lightning bolt, the vibrant flames trailing behind him as he closes the gap on the automaton. The students are losing their minds, screaming in excitement at the sheer visual spectacle of the multicolored fire. Hans Barmuth scoffs from the sideline, dismissing it as just fancy fireworks from a mana-starved loser. But Sehun is moving too fast for anyone to track, his body a blur as he channels every ounce of mana into his next strike. He knows the flames on his blade naturally want to clash and explode, and without perfect control, they'd blow up in his face. Using his Artisan of Flame skill, he forcibly injects that volatile crimson fire directly into the specially made inner lining of his sheath. His eyes glow with a fierce light as he whispers that the storage is complete. He's just turned his weapon into a pressurized bomb. The automaton senses the danger and deploys its heavy hexagonal mana shields, bracing for the impact. A massive ritualistic seal of fire appears in the air as Sehun prepares to unleash his ultimate technique. With a violent pull, he draws the blade, the compressed energy screaming as it's finally released. The weapon skill Wildfire activates, detonating all that compressed mana at once in a single lethal point. The result is a blinding explosion of pure energy that swallows the automaton whole, shattering its shields like glass. The VIPs are stunned, their faces frozen in disbelief as the shockwave ripples through the stadium. As the smoke clears, a strange heavy pressure hangs in the air, leaving the announcer trembling. Sehun slowly sheaths his sword, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps as sweat beads on his forehead. He looks down at the massive trench he carved into the arena floor and wonders to himself if he maybe went a little too far. The announcer is so shaken he can barely speak, calling for the construction team to fix the auditorium while officially ending the demonstration. Shortly after, the rhythmic click of heels echoes down a hallway as someone approaches Sehun's private waiting room. Sehun sits on a sofa, exhausted and clutching his arm, still feeling the recoil from that massive mana dump. The door opens and Ryun-ha walks in, apologizing for the wait because she had to help clean up the mess he made. Sehun quickly stands up and apologizes, feeling a bit guilty for wrecking the school's expensive arena on his first day. He admits he should have held back more, but Ryun-ha just stares at him, confused by his modesty. He asks if she called him here to scold him, looking genuinely worried about the consequences. She waves her hands frantically, telling him that's the last thing she'd ever do. Suddenly, a loud, thunderous growl erupts from her stomach, echoing through the quiet room. She blushes and clears her throat, trying to regain her dignity, then makes a shocking offer. She'll pay 10 times the market price for his gear. Sehun is stunned, his eyes wide as he processes the insane amount of money she's offering for a freshman's work. She looks him dead in the eye and asks point blank if he'll sell the 5-color flame blade and the sheath to her. The silence in the room is heavy as Sehun realizes just how much he's impressed the legendary weapon eater. He can only manage a confused pardon as the reality of the situation sinks in. Suddenly, a system notification pings in the air. A bond has officially been formed with Ryun-ha. Ryun-ha is practically glowing with excitement, praising the weapon set as a level 1 bond is established between them. Sehun is shocked it happened so fast. In his past life, she had to eat several of his legendary weapons before she'd even consider him a friend. He realizes this is a golden opportunity and offers a small, grateful smile. He activates his unique skill, Bond Extraction, his hands glowing with a soft blue light as he reaches for her essence. The system confirms the extraction, pulling a high-grade material called greed iron from their new connection, a metal that devours other iron to generate heat. A jagged, glowing red ore manifests in his hand, and he whispers, "Got it," satisfied with the haul. Ryun-ha leans in close, invading his personal space as she asks again if he's going to sell her the weapons. He bluntly says no, catching her completely off guard, just as a knock at the door interrupts them. Professor Kim steps in, looking serious, and tells them the headmaster wants to start the award ceremony immediately. He asks to take Sehun with him, and Ryun-ha reluctantly lets him go, her eyes still lingering on the boy's potential. Sehun gives a polite nod and promises to see her later, leaving her alone in the room. As soon as the door shuts, Ryun-ha's stomach growls again, leaving her clutching her midsection in the empty room. The scene shifts to the heart of Babel Academy, the ancient and majestic Marduk Manor. Professor Kim leads Sehun down a hall lined with classical statues, the atmosphere thick with history and power. The professor warns Sehun to mind his manners, reminding him that the headmaster was generous enough to overlook the destruction of the arena. They stop in front of a pair of massive, ornate doors that lead to the office of a man who is on a completely different level of existence. Sehun just smirks and tells the professor not to worry, he's dealt with kings and gods before. They enter the Grand Library office, where the ascended Emperor Ludwig Schubert sits behind a desk, his presence filling the room. Sehun remembers the truth about this man. He was the hero who took down a demon god in a suicide mission during the original timeline. He realizes he's standing in front of a full clearer, someone who has truly reached the peak of humanity's power. Ludwig opens his eyes slightly, telling Sehun that every weapon he showed during the demonstration was absolutely fascinating. He admits there were some minor flaws, but says he's looking forward to what our boy does next. Sehun takes the criticism in stride, though secretly, his pride as a master blacksmith makes him want to toss his current gear into a furnace and start over. Ludwig decides to reward Sehun's talent and effort with a special prize. He tells the cadet that he's going to give him not 1, but 2 rare rewards. Sehun is intrigued, rubbing his chin as the Emperor tells him to name what he needs. Without hesitating, Sehun asks for rewards that can help raise his mana and his memory, knowing these are his biggest weaknesses. Ludwig raises a hand, and golden particles begin to swirl in the air, manifesting 2 incredible items. The items thud onto the desk, glowing with a divine intensity. Sehun views the stats: heroic grade ink-heavy darkness, which devours mana, and the rare dream ivory, a molar from a dream-eating beast that allows entry into dreams. He's stunned. Ink-heavy darkness is rare enough, but dream ivory is almost impossible to find in this era. A satisfied smirk crosses his face as he realizes these materials are perfect for his next big project. Ludwig watches him closely, asking if the rewards are to his liking. Sehun bows deeply, holding the items tight and telling the headmaster that they are absolutely perfect. As Sehun walks away through the courtyard, Ludwig watches him from his window, wondering what exactly is going on in that kid's head. A golden key emblem floats behind the headmaster as he questions if giving 2 rewards to one student was a bit much. Ludwig lights a pipe, noting that Sehun didn't feel like a teenager, he felt like an old man trapped in a kid's body. His eyes sharpen as he realizes Sehun's depth is so immense that even he, the Emperor, can't fully gauge it. The MC walks away with a confident stride, the ground beneath him practically vibrating with his hidden potential. The next day, the academy is bright and bustling as the students head to their first official classes. Inside the lecture hall, students are chatting and laughing, oblivious to the high-stakes world Sehun is building. Hans Barmouth is busy bragging to his friends about his connections, claiming he's having lunch with a top third-year student named Howard. He puts on a fake humble act, saying Howard just wanted to give him some advice because their families are so close. The door creaks open and Sehun walks in, the atmosphere in the room instantly shifting to cold tension. His eyes glow with that same intense orange light, his presence alone silencing the room as he walks to his seat. He walks right past the arrogant Hans without even acknowledging him, treating the elite student like a ghost. Hans is shaken to his core, sweating as he wonders what is wrong with Sehun's terrifying eyes. Sehun sits down, thinking to himself that at least the blonde brat knows his place enough to shut up. Hans grips his desk so hard his knuckles turn white, cursing Sehun as a rootless nobody under his breath. Suddenly, Professor Kim walks in, commanding everyone to sit down and focus. He brings a large white box to the front of the room, looking over the class of aspiring blacksmiths. He announces that for their first class, they'll be doing introductions with a twist. He opens the box to reveal glowing, jagged rocks known as projection alloy. The professor explains that this ore is incredibly sensitive to mana, thousands of times more so than normal metal. He demonstrates by injecting his own mana, and the ore instantly erupts into a violent, swirling flame. Right before their eyes, the metal reshapes itself into a massive jet-black blade that mirrors the professor's intent. Sehun watches with genuine respect, acknowledging that Kim In-cheol really does deserve his spot as one of the world's top 100 artisans. He senses something unique from the sword, a reflection of the professor's own soul and hidden depth. The professor explains that because the alloy is so sensitive, it's terrible for real combat, but perfect for self-reflection. He calls these weapons doppelgangers and tells the class their first assignment is to make one that represents who they truly are. The students are a mix of excited and nervous, realizing their creations will be on display for the whole school to see. One student realizes the sheer cost of the alloy, over 10 million won per piece, showing just how much Babel invests in its students. Hans quickly forms a flashy, elegant rapier, desperate to prove he's still the most talented one in the room. Sehun sighs, looking around at the fancy weapons and realizing that nobody here has any actual raw talent. The professor calls on Sehun last, and the entire class turns to watch the top cadet do his thing. Sehun holds the projection alloy, staring at his own reflection and realizing there's no point in holding back anymore. He decides that since he's doing this anyway, he might as well go all out and show them what the last blacksmith is made of. His eyes flare with power as the mana begins to surge, preparing to forge something that will leave the entire academy in absolute shock. The crowd is buzzing at the exhibition, and everyone is flocking toward one specific display, whispering that it has to be the work of the freshman monster, Lee Sehun. Standard swords look like toys compared to what's on the main pedestal. It's clear this freshman is operating on a level the school hasn't seen in decades. 2 students stare in total shock, their jaws hitting the floor as they realize the rumors about Sehun weren't just hype, they were an understatement. The display is insane. It's a cluster of 19 different weapons merged into one massive, glowing structure that the school judges decided to leave as is because it was too perfect to dismantle. Some jealous students try to play it off as a lucky skill effect, refusing to believe a blacksmith could actually be this talented, but deep down, they're terrified of his potential. Erika Ino stands in the crowd, her cold eyes narrowed as she stares at the weapon. She's not buying the luck excuse for a second. A blonde student stands next to her, looking just as impressed and realizing that this blacksmith is a game changer for the academy's power balance. Erika thinks to herself that even with all that rare alloy, the school's display doesn't even come close to capturing the true, terrifying essence of Lee Sehun. Meanwhile, the man himself is back in the workshop, the sound of his hammer ringing out like thunder as he pushes his limits. Sehun's eyes are wide with focus, sweat pouring down his face as he fights against the exhaustion threatening to shut his body down. The other smiths in the room are watching him like he's a ghost, realizing his timing hasn't been off by even a fraction of a second for hours. The teaching assistant watches from the side, looking completely demoralized as he realizes he has absolutely nothing left to teach a kid like this. He decides it's better to just stay out of the way and asks the class if anyone else wants a demo, clearly wanting to avoid being compared to Sehun. Class is finally dismissed, and the room clears out, leaving Sehun alone at his workbench surrounded by half-finished blades. He lets out a long, heavy breath, his steam-filled lungs burning as he tries to stabilize the mana swirling around his hammer. He looks down at his work, frustrated that his physical stamina is failing before he can even finish the refining process. Suddenly, a shadow looms over him as the TA asks if he's planning on smashing another masterpiece into scrap metal. Sehun stops his swing midair, acknowledging the assistant with a tired but sharp look. The TA warns him not to break the current batch, because everything they make this week is already sold and scheduled for delivery. He explains that Bobble's budget actually depends on their external sales, so Sehun needs to play nice with the school's business for once. The TA looks at Sehun's exhausted state and asks what he's so unhappy with, his body or his lack of mana? Sehun gives a small, self-deprecating smirk and admits that, for right now, it's definitely his weak body that's the problem. He stares at the ink-heavy darkness block on his table, knowing that without better stamina, he can't even attempt to refine it without passing out. The TA thinks for a moment, resting a sword on his shoulder, and offers a bit of logic that changes everything for RMC. He suggests that if it's just for the sake of smithing, using temporary buffs might be way faster than months of physical training. Sehun's eyes widen as the realization hits him. He was so focused on his old-school, pure training methods from his past life that he completely ignored modern shortcuts. He realizes that as long as a buff is active, his weak body won't matter. He'll have the power needed to refine the Emperor's materials right now. He gives the TA a respectful bow, genuinely thanking him for the advice, which catches the older student off guard. Before he leaves, Sehun casually drops a bomb of advice, telling the TA he's wasting 30% of his mana by not focusing his strikes on a single point. He walks away, leaving the senior standing there in a daze, wondering how a freshman just coached him on high-level smithing. The TA is left with his jaw hanging open, trying to process the fact that he just got schooled by the very kid he was trying to help. He looks down at his hammer, the weight of Sehun's words sinking in as the sky begins to turn a bright, clear blue. Babel Academy is a place of freedom where students can jump between faculties and take dozens of courses if they can handle the heat. But the freedom comes with a price. Fail 3 times, and you're expelled, leaving the students to face the consequences of their own choices. The campus train announces the next stop, the Department of Ritual Arts, where the real magic happens. Sehun steps off the train, looking calm and prepared to dive into a field he hasn't touched in decades. Suddenly, he spots Erika Inio walking toward him, flanked by a group of large, intimidating students. One of her lackeys steps forward and aggressively tells Sehun to get out of the way, not realizing who he's talking to. Sehun doesn't move an inch, his golden eyes flaring with a cold pressure as he tells the guy to be the one who moves instead. Erika stops her group and stares at Sehun, her expression unreadable as she asks him where exactly he thinks he's going. He bluntly tells her he's looking for a minor in ritual arts, leaving her followers whispering in shock that the young lady even knows this guy. Erika surprises everyone by offering to show him the way herself, ignoring her shocked bodyguards. One of the guys reminds her they have an important meeting with the seniors, but Erika just dismisses them without even looking back. She tells them she's not interested in their politics, her cold aura sending a literal shiver down their spines. Sehun watches her, noting that her personality is just as sharp and unyielding as it was in the future he came from. The two of them walk through the station in a strange, tense silence, with Erika's followers watching from the shadows in total disbelief. Erika breaks the silence, asking Sehun what kind of specific minor or buff he's actually looking for. He explains that he needs something to enhance his physical abilities without interfering with the delicate work of smithing. They walk through the academy grounds, looking like a power couple that everyone is too afraid to approach. Erika suggests barrier arts, but Sehun is skeptical, thinking that's purely a defensive skill. She tells him it depends on the user and reaches into her uniform to pull out a mysterious black envelope. The air around her ripples with mana as a massive, intricate ritual circle appears, filled with chains and ancient symbols. She hands him the envelope and gives him a simple challenge. Try tearing this. Sehun grips the paper, and as he pulls, he feels a strange resistance. It's not just hard, it's responding to his strength. He realizes the trick. The barrier maintains the paper's flexibility, but the harder you hit it, the harder it becomes to protect itself. Erika smiles slightly, telling him a technique like this would be perfect for smithing, but warns him he'll need a professor's help for something so complex. She offers to introduce him to the barrier construction professor, who actually happens to be a relative of her family. She starts to ask for the invitation back, but then she stops, noticing something strange about the seal. Sehun has a terrifying look in his eyes as he stares at the ritual pattern, his mind already deconstructing the entire spell. Erika is frozen in shock as she realizes Sehun didn't just understand her family's secret technique, he just broke through it. He casually tosses the pieces aside and notes that barrier arts aren't bad, completely oblivious to the fact that he just did the impossible. He thanks her for the tip and tells her to go have lunch with the guys tailing her, walking away like it was nothing. Her bodyguards rush over, frantic and worried, asking if she's okay after that display of power. Erica just stares at the shredded remains of the envelope on the ground, her mind reeling. She whispers that the envelope wasn't just a test, it was a noblesse invitation to an elite meeting, and he just ripped it to shreds. The news of Erica walking with a student from another faculty spreads through the ritual arts department like wildfire. Everyone is staring as the two walk together, wondering if the Ice Queen has finally found someone she actually likes. Sehun overhears the rumors and just rolls his eyes, thinking that if Erica actually liked him, his bond skill would have pinged by now. He's more annoyed that he has to take a special entrance test just to sign up for a basic lecture. Erica leads him to a dense, mist-covered forest, telling him this is the official test site for barrier construction. Sehun looks around the eerie woods, wondering if the test is just some boring treasure hunt. He sighs and walks into the mist, thinking this whole process is becoming a massive pain in the neck. Suddenly, the air shatters like glass as he takes a step, the reality around him warping and dissolving. Two instructors appear out of nowhere, looking absolutely stunned, and tell him he's already passed the test. Sehun is confused, asking, "Excuse me?" as he realizes the mist was actually a complex labyrinth he just walked through. Professor Robert Perry sits in his office, looking at Sehun's file and wondering why the Ino family's young lady is suddenly so interested in a blacksmith. His assistant shows him a photo of the two together, confirming that enrollment for his class has tripled just because people want to see the couple. The professor sighs as he looks at the image on his phone, realizing this is going to be a very long semester. He rubs his temples in frustration, knowing that having two faculty tops in one room is a recipe for total chaos. A shadowy figure, young Master Ano, appears on a screen, revealing he's the one who requested a special test for Sehun this year. The professor agrees to use the Soul Dazzle Labyrinth, a barrier designed to break the minds of even experienced mages. The system explains that the Soul Dazzle Labyrinth is a high-level ritual that twists the five senses, making it impossible to escape without knowing the code. The professor watches the students enter, thinking that if you know nothing about rituals, you won't even realize you're trapped until it's too late. But as he watches Sehun, his eyes widen. He realizes the boy didn't use any magic to escape. He walked through it purely on instinct. He walks out into the forest and announces to the group that they've all passed the first phase. A red-haired student with freckles steps forward, full of confidence, and volunteers to go first for the second test. He thinks this is his big chance to impress Erica and show everyone that real ritualists are better than some technical student. Professor Perry explains the second test is simple. They have to break a specialized barrier using only their mana. A massive, glowing red spiderweb snaps into existence on the ground, humming with dangerous energy. The student kneels and begins to pump mana into the web, trying to pin down the spider at its core. The system explains the web's structure. The spider senses mana and flees, and as long as it lives, the web regenerates infinitely. The student is struggling hard, realize he doesn't have enough mana to cover the entire pattern at once like the textbooks say. In a fit of desperation, he tries to crush the spider with pure speed, pushing his mana to the breaking point. The web shatters in a mess of sparks, and the professor notes his time, 2 minutes and 23 seconds. The kid is panting and exhausted, but Erika looks completely bored, not giving him a single ounce of attention. The next few students try their luck, but they all fail miserably, their mana being eaten by the regenerating web. The professor coldly tells them they'll be starting from the basic classes, leaving them slumped on the ground in shame. Next up is Erika Ino, and the entire atmosphere changes as she steps forward with a calm, regal grace. She closes her eyes for a split second, her focus sharpening to a lethal edge. She reaches out a single finger, her mana flowing into the web like a calm ripple on a pond. Suddenly, the entire web pulses with a blinding white light as she takes control of the ritual's core. The students are horrified as the web doesn't just break, it literally collapses under her superior logic, killing the spider instantly. Erika looks as stoic as ever, proving why she's the undisputed top of the support faculty. The professor announces her time, 22 seconds, though he notes she could have been even faster if she followed the textbook method. Finally, it's Sehun's turn, and the professor watches him with a predatory gaze, wanting to see if this genius is for real. At a glance, Sehun looks like an ordinary student, but the air around him feels strangely heavy. The red web manifests again, its glowing strands waiting to trap his mana. Sehun just crouches down and stares at it for a long time, not doing anything, which makes the other students start to snicker. They whisper that he's probably frozen in fear because he finally realized he's out of his league. But in Sehun's mind, he's seeing a connection. This barrier behaves exactly like the ink-heavy darkness material he received from the Emperor. He realizes that to refine his rare material, he has to learn how to apply mana at the perfect ratio, all at once, just like breaking this web. The professor walks closer, wondering what on earth is going through the boy's head. Erika tells the professor to just let him be, her eyes fixed on Sehun with intense curiosity. The professor closes his eyes, thinking Sehun is just wasting everyone's time by overthinking it. But then, Sehun's hand ignites with a violent, swirling fire as he reaches for the web. A pillar of intense flame erupts from his hand, the heat so strong it makes the nearby grass turn to ash. The spider tries to flee, but it has nowhere to go as Sehun's mana floods the entire system in a single, overwhelming surge. The students are blinded by the explosion of fire and mana as Sehun literally rewrites the ritual on the fly. He presses his hand to the scorched ground and whispers, "There," as the last of the barrier dissolves into nothing. A huge smile breaks across his face as he realizes he's finally figured it out. He now has the formula to refine the ink-heavy darkness. He stands up and casually walks away, the embers of his fire still flickering on the grass. Erika and the professor watch him walk away in total silence, the shock in the air so thick you could cut it with a knife. The assistant stammers that the time was 7 minutes and 45 seconds, thinking Sehun failed miserably compared to Erika. But Professor Perry just smiles, realizing that the exact time doesn't matter at all. He realizes Sehun didn't just break the barrier, he analyzed it, mastered it, and created a whole new formula for dismantling it that didn't exist before. Erika watches Sehun's retreating back, her heart racing as she realizes that if he adds these ritual arts to his smithing, the world isn't ready for what he's about to create. The Babel administration office is hit with a shocking request. A freshman wants to perform intermediate-level smithing using hero-grade materials, and they need a professor to supervise the safety risk. Notifications start blowing up the office chat as professors from all over the academy scramble to sign up, dying to see the kid who's been breaking every record in the book. Interestingly, not a single person from Vice Dean Michael's corrupt faction shows up. It looks like they're still pouting after Sehun humiliated Michael's son. The administrator is about to pick a supervisor, but he's interrupted by a notification that stops him dead in his tracks. His eyes nearly pop out of his head. The faculty head herself, Ryuun-ha, has stepped in to personally observe Sehun's work. Sehun is already in the workshop, looking focused and ready for war, when Ryuun-ha walks in with a sharp, expectant look. She tells him she's there to personally vet his skills, looking every bit the S-rank hero as she stands there with her arms crossed. Sehun doesn't back down, simply nodding and telling her he'll have to give it his absolute best then. He pulls out the block of ink-heavy darkness, the material looking like a void that swallows the light in the room. He begins the dark curtain process, the most brutal way to handle this material, dropping it into a vat of pitch-black liquid. Using only his mana, he has to force the darkness to spread like water and manually separate the impurities while hidden from sight. It's a process of total reconstruction. He's essentially rebuilding the material from the molecular level with nothing but his willpower. Ryuun-ha watches in silence, noting that Sehun is pushing himself far beyond what any normal student or even most professors could handle. Sehun manages to shrink the darkness down to a quarter of its size, increasing its purity to the absolute limit. He moves to the second stage, his hand glowing with a fierce red light as he prepares the next step of the ritual. He erupts into a whirlwind of motion, the workshop filling with the roar of flames as he begins the real work. He channels Crimson Flame mana through the material, sifting through the energy to find the perfect heat for the core. The flames turn a vibrant, eerie green. This is the Guardian Wildfire, a stabilized state of energy that maintains a perfect, lethal temperature. Now comes the third stage. Sehun hammers the darkness relentlessly with a hammer wreathed in that green fire, fighting through the spatial distortion it creates. Ryuun-ha clenches her teeth, realizing that even if Sehun is immune to the fire, the sheer physical pain of this process must be absolute agony. She wonders just how many times he's worn himself down like this in the past to gain such terrifying mastery over the forge. The sound of his hammer echoes through the entire academy grounds as the sun begins to set, signaling hours of non-stop labor. Ryuun-ha lets out a yawn, her stoic mask slipping as the night drags on, but Sehun hasn't slowed down for a single second. 4 hours into the refinement, and the entire room is thick with steam and the smell of ozone. Sehun's hand is trembling, his muscles screaming for him to stop, but he grips the hammer with a deathly intensity. Finally, the ink-heavy darkness, now saturated with enough flame to level a building, begins to stabilize and change form. The spatial distortion stops, and a perfect, liquid black drop falls from the material, the sign of a successful refinement. Sehun quickly grabs the tongs and prepares the finished darkness for the final shaping. He begins pouring it into pre-prepared molds, which confuses Ryuun-ha. She thinks casting will ruin the material's properties. She's about to speak up, but then she sees the look in Sehun's eyes. He's not just casting, he's doing something much crazier. He uses the barrier-breaking formula he learned from Erica to slow down time within the mold, and in that split second, he constructs an entire mana circuit. The mold shatters, a blinding flash of light filling the room as the material finally accepts its new form. A system ping echoes in his mind. The ink spider bracelet is complete, a masterpiece forged from pure recklessness and insane skill. Sehun gasps for air, his body finally failing as he gains the new skill, Dark Spirit Master. The stats of the bracelet are legendary. It's a rare grade item that stores the wearer's mana and allows for the use of burst detonation. Sehun smirks, calling it a success, but then a loud, echoing growl comes from the corner of the room. Ryuan-ha is blushing furiously, her stomach betraying her as she stares at the delicious energy coming off the smithing leftovers. Sehun lets out a tired sigh, leaning back and closing his eyes as he finally allows his body to rest. Ryuan-ha leans over the workbench, noting that the resonance coming from his work is absolutely top tier. He's made a whole set of black bands, his mind already calculating the next phase of his gear. He realizes that with a little more work, he can turn these into a set bonus that will skyrocket his stats. He apologizes to Ryuan-ha, explaining he can't give her the bracelet yet, but offers her the spent molds as a palate cleanser. He watches with a calm expression as she prepares to taste his work. She activates her unique skill, Soul Melting Furnace, her red hair glowing like liquid magma. She bites into the refined scrap metal and admits with a blush that it's actually quite tasty. She describes the flavor as similar to fried batter crumbs, which is a huge compliment coming from the world's pickiest weapon eater. Sehun thinks to himself that his habit of tailoring weapons to her specific taste in his past life is finally paying off. He gives a small smile, realizing that keeping her fed is the fastest way to raise their bond level. She munches on the scraps, looking longingly at the bracelet but respecting his decision to keep it. She asks him what he plans to do with the 5-color flame blade and the fire sheath he made earlier. When he says he's not selling them right now, she's genuinely shocked, wondering if her offer wasn't high enough. He tells her he needs them for the upcoming subjugation classes, and then adds with a smirk that hunger is the best seasoning. Ryuan-ha blushes and agrees to wait, her respect for his artisan's soul growing by the second. She asks if that's all for today, ready to wrap things up. She tells him the staff will handle the cleanup, which is a massive relief for Sehun because he can barely stand. As he tries to walk, his vision blurs and his legs give out. The toll of 4 hours of high-level forging finally hits home. Before he can hit the floor, Ryuan-ha catches him, her red eyes filled with a mix of concern and admiration. He gives a weak, embarrassed smile and admits he might have misjudged his own stamina. She tells him she'll see him back to his dorm and then asks if he's got any fear of heights. He manages a faint none, wondering what she has planned. She scoops him up in a perfect princess carry, her power surging as she prepares to take off. With a massive explosion of mana, she launches herself into the night sky like a crimson comet. Sehun is stunned, realizing she drew out that much raw power just from eating the batter crumbs of his smithing scraps. He closes his eyes, thinking about how insane this woman is in so many different ways. As they fly through the air, Sehun realizes that this timeline is already becoming a lot more vibrant than his previous life. Down below, Erika Ino is still waiting in front of his dorm, clutching an invitation and wondering why the heck he isn't back yet. By the next morning, the Babel Academy message boards are on fire with a photo of Erika waiting for 3 hours in front of the smithing building. Students are losing their minds in the comments, arguing over whether the Ice Queen is actually dating the freshman blacksmith. Sehun checks the board during class and just sighs, figuring if it was actually important, she'd eventually track him down again. The door to the lecture hall swings open as a muscular guy with a red bandana introduces himself as Ricaros Miles. He bluntly tells the class of smiths to move to the training center and warns that the last one there runs 20 extra laps. The students scramble out of their seats in a panic, realizing this theory class is about to get very physical. Sehun is breathing hard, annoyed that his morning of peace has been replaced by a surprise marathon. He tells himself to just shut up and run, his mind already focusing on the training potential. He's trailing at the back of the pack, his low physical stats making it a struggle just to keep pace with the other students. Ricaros watches him with a judging look as Sehun finally crosses the finish line for his extra 20 laps. Our boy doesn't complain, simply nodding and heading back out to finish his punishment. The other students whisper and mock him, wondering how a genius blacksmith can have such pathetic, rock-bottom stamina. Ricaros shouts for everyone to focus up as he walks into the center of the arena. He explains the curriculum has changed because of the Flame Blade Hunts, a mysterious group targeting master blacksmiths. Sehun's eyes sharpen. He remembers the Flame Blade case. It was a series of unsolved murders that even the top heroes couldn't stop in his past life. The professor tells the class they need to learn to defend their own bodies because a dead blacksmith can't forge anything. Rikaros announces they're focusing on swords today, and Sehun decides this is the perfect time to test his new gear. He realizes that for the high-level smithing he wants to do, he needs to build a physical foundation right now. He grips the ink spider bracelet on his wrist, feeling its steady hum against his skin. The system confirms the skill. Burst detonation allows for the manipulation of gravity within a 1-meter radius. Sehun checks his status window and sees that his stats have all jumped by at least 5 points. He's finally starting to look like a hero. Rikaros yells at him to stop running and get over there for the combat test. Sehun activates the bracelet's gravity, his vision swimming as he forces his body to move under 10 times the normal weight. Rikaros is impressed, noting that Sehun looks a lot more solid than he did 10 minutes ago. He tosses Sehun a training sword and tells him to try swinging to see if he's got any talent for the blade. Sehun finds it tough to move properly with the extra gravity, his muscles straining against the invisible weight. He takes a basic stance, thinking to himself that while his current technique isn't great, it should be enough. He lunges forward, his strike looking slow to the untrained eye but carrying a terrifying, focused intent. The other students laugh, thinking he's just tired from the run, though they admit his form is surprisingly decent. But Rikaros' eyes widen. He sees the truth. Sehun's sword knows exactly where it's headed before the swing even starts. He tells Sehun he's too impatient and prepares to counter, but Sehun just gives a cold, golden-eyed glare. The professor is suddenly hit with a wave of pure intimidation, his instincts screaming at him to back off from a mere student. In a blur of motion, Sehun shifts his weight and unleashes a high-level strike that defies common logic. The training sword stops a fraction of an inch from the professor's throat, the air whistling from the sheer speed of the move. Rikaros stands frozen, sweat dripping down his face as he stares at the tip of the blade. He can't believe he was actually intimidated by a technical track cadet, and his pride is taking a serious hit. He asks Sehun where on earth he learned such high-level swordsmanship. Sehun gives a sheepish smile and tells the biggest lie of his life. I just watched some combat videos online and copied them. The scene shifts to a flashback of a younger Sehun dealing with a debt-ridden, drunk swordsman in his previous life. The man, Ma Guangsu, was begging to pay off his debts with secret techniques instead of cash, and Sehun was forced to learn them all. Back in the present, Rikaros is scratching his head, not buying the YouTube excuse for a second, but too impressed to care. He asks Sehun if he'd be interested in actually learning how to use a sword properly from a real master. That afternoon, Sehun heads to the Akar Kuf building with a personal recommendation from Rikaros. He walks into a room where a man is screaming at a blonde student, telling him he has absolutely nothing left to teach him. This is the retired S-rank hero and legendary swordbreaker, Ma Guangsu. Sehun smirks, realizing the gambling addict he used to babysit in the future is actually a high-level professor in this timeline. Ma Guangsu turns his sharp gaze on Sehun, asking him who the heck he is. Sehun presents the recommendation, and a student nearby whispers that this kid is the top cadet of the smithing faculty. The professor looks Sehun up and down, unimpressed by his thin build and lack of apparent aura. He points a finger at the other student and gives Sehun a simple, brutal ultimatum. He tells Sehun to beat that guy in a spar, and only then will he even consider teaching him. It's a one-round match, the first clean hit wins, and the stakes couldn't be higher for Sehun's physical growth. Ma Guangsu raises his hand, the atmosphere in the room becoming heavy with anticipation. He shouts, "Begin!" and the blonde student charges forward with explosive speed. Sehun stays low, his eyes tracking every muscle movement of his opponent. Ma Guangsu notes that Sehun is using a relaxation technique to maximize his flexibility, which is a master-level move. The opponent reaches out for a grapple, thinking he's found a weakness in Sehun's thin frame. The professor scoffs, realizing Sehun is already playing complex mind games before the first strike even lands. Sehun twists his body mid-air, dodging the grab with an almost supernatural grace. He slams into the student's chest, using his shoulder to throw the heavier guy completely off balance. The opponent is shocked by the raw strength coming from Sehun's seemingly weak arms. But the student manages to recover, pinning Sehun to the ground in a desperate counter-grapple. Sehun just whispers burst detonation, his bracelet glowing with an intense blue light. A sudden wave of massive gravity slams into the room, pinning the opponent to the floor with the force of a falling mountain. Sehun grunts in pain, the mana drained from the bracelet nearly making him pass out. The blonde student is crushed into the mats, unable to move a single finger under the localized gravity field. He coughs up a bit of blood, his eyes rolling back as he loses consciousness from the sheer pressure. Sehun stands over him with a triumphant smirk, telling the stunned professor that he was just a little bit faster, and he's ready to start his real training. Most people see a hunk of metal, but Sehun sees a weapon that can kill a god, and today, he's starting with himself. The spar is over, and the top student of the combat faculty is left gasping on the floor, unable to believe he just got schooled by a blacksmith. Professor Ma Guangsu isn't in the mood for an audience. He barks at the other students to get out immediately. Hans, the blonde rival, tries to remind the professor of a promise, but he's met with a terrifying glare. Sehun stays cool, leaning back on the floor with a smirk, teasing Guangsu that since he actually landed a hit, maybe he should be the one teaching the professor instead. Guangsu doesn't take the bait, muttering that a Borsippa cadet beating the top fighter would be a PR nightmare if the word got out. Hans is left sweating, realizing the gap between them is wider than he thought. The professor sighs, deciding he has to at least make this half-wit Hans capable of holding a sword properly, while Hans prepares for a grueling training session. Guangsu tells Hans he'll set a time for his private lessons, and the blonde boy's face lights up like he just won the lottery. Hans bows so hard he nearly hits the floor, shouting his thanks while Guangsu casually waves him off, telling him to beat it. Now that they're alone, the atmosphere gets heavy as Guangsu turns his full attention to Sehun, having something much more serious to discuss. Guangsu draws a training sword and demands to see the exact technique Sehun used in his earlier fight against Professor Regressor. Sehun doesn't hesitate, stepping into a ready stance. Sehun's eyes sharpen as he lunges forward, his movement a blur as he executes a high-level strike that shouldn't be possible for a freshman. The swords clash with a sharp ring, the force of the impact sending a shockwave through the room as Guangsu effortlessly parries the strike. Sehun pulls back, breathing slightly harder, while Guangsu notes that the move is a first-sight kill, designed to end a fight before the enemy even knows it started. The professor points his blade at Sehun, critiquing that while the concept is brilliant, the execution is still crude and full of holes. He warns Sehun that a technique that becomes a weakness after the first attempt isn't a master's move. Guangsu gets heated, yelling that if Sehun had tried to teach this half-baked crap to anyone else, he would have broken his limbs himself. Sehun just gives a nervous laugh, knowing the guy who originally taught him in the future was just as scary. The professor vows to forge Sehun's weak teenage body into something that can actually handle the high-level techniques he's trying to use. Sehun clenches his fist, feeling the gravity of the training ahead. Sehun casually asks if this means he's officially registered for the class, catching the professor off guard with his bluntness. Guangsu just blinks, realized he's been played into agreeing. With the deal sealed, Sehun gives a quick bow and heads for the exit, not wasting a single second of his time. Guangsu watches him go, clicking his tongue and wondering how a kid can be so dismissive and blunt toward a legendary hero. Walking through the academy halls, Sehun thinks to himself that the professor is just acting tough because of his high rank, but he's got other things to worry about. Suddenly, a voice calls out to him. It's Hans, running down the hallway to catch up, waving his arms like a madman. Sehun stops, looking annoyed, and asks the blonde guy why he's still hanging around. Hans reaches into his jacket and pulls out a fancy black envelope sealed with red wax, telling Sehun he has something important to give him. It's an invitation to Noblesse, an exclusive club for the Academy's elite families. Sehun immediately recognizes the name and wonders if Erika Inoue was the one behind this. Hans admits the place is full of arrogant jerks, but thinks it's a goldmine of opportunity for a talented guy like Sehun. Sehun hesitates, looking at the expensive card. Hans flashes a bright, sincere smile, saying it's the least he could do after Sehun's help got him into Guangsu's private lessons. Sehun accepts the card with a rare, small smile, simply saying thanks. Maybe having a rival who's also a fan isn't the worst thing. As he continues his walk, Sehun goes over his schedule, noting he's already signed up for barrier construction and physical control. He considers taking a minor in the Borsippa faculty, thinking about alchemy or enchantment, when suddenly, someone bumps right into him. Before he can even react, a hand reaches out and grabs his wrist with surprising strength. Sehun's eyes widen as he's pulled to a halt. He finds himself staring into the intense, wide eyes of a girl with messy red hair and large glasses. She's staring at his gravity bracelet like it's a piece of holy scripture, her face inches from his as she asks if he was the one who made it. Sehun keeps his guard up, asking what if he did, as the girl continues to inspect the craftsmanship with a fanatical look on her face. She starts drooling slightly, her face flushing with excitement as she begs him to let her enchant the bracelet for him. A system window pops up. A bond has been established with Leah Claudel. Sehun realizes she's the legendary genius who once shattered the entire enchantment industry with her armaments. Leah is losing her mind, screaming about how rare it is to find a heavyweight ore that's been refined to such a high grade. They move to a nearby cafe where Leah sits hunched over the bracelet, mumbling to herself about the endless formulas she could cram into the metal's mana array. Sehun sips his coffee, watching her have a full-blown mental breakdown over how eccentric the piece is. He asks if there's something wrong with the work. She yells back that the problem is that it's too good. She's shocked that a heavyweight material could have such perfect compatibility for enchantment. As she rambles about the overwhelming number of options, Sehun cuts her off, saying it'll be fine because he brought something else. He reveals a second piece of work, and Leah's eyes practically turn into stars. Sehun warns her about a resonance phenomenon she needs to keep in mind, and the sheer technical depth of his knowledge leaves her completely breathless and blushing. Suddenly, a shadow falls over their table. A tall guy with spiky hair demands to know Sehun's true identity. Sehun doesn't even look up, calmly stating he's just a first year in the smelting department. Leah is shocked that the boy she's talking to is only a freshman while she's a third year in enchantment, but the mood is quickly ruined as the newcomer slams his hand down. The guy, a subordinate named Myers, tells Sehun to follow him immediately, his expression grim and threatening. Leah jumps up, furious that she was interrupted, but Sehun remains seated, realizing this guy is likely one of Erika's family servants. Myers says he wants to handle this quietly, but Sehun isn't moving an inch, telling the guy to just say whatever he has to say right here. Myers scolds Sehun, demanding an apology for being disrespectful to Lady Erika. He's pissed that Sehun supposedly tore up the invitation she gave him in front of everyone. Sehun looks him dead in the eye, pointing out the obvious. Erika was the one who told him to tear it. He's not going to apologize for following orders. The subordinate's eyes narrow. Realizing Sehun isn't going to be easy to bully, he mutters that he shouldn't have taken the job if it was going to be this annoying. Sehun leans his head on his hand, looking bored. He asks if Erika actually sent him, or if he's just acting out on his own. Myers claims this is his own decision, but Leah is in the background stifling a laugh at how obvious he is. Leah flat out calls him a liar, her face twisting into a mocking grin. She points out that everyone knows Myers is basically the young master's servant, implying he's acting for someone higher up in the family. Sehun watches as the guy's face turns red with rage. Losing his cool, Myers shouts about how a has-been like Sehun dares to talk back. He snaps his fingers and a massive surge of mana erupts around him, catching Leah by surprise. Sehun stands up, his expression cold as ice. He tells Myers that while Babel is full of talented people, the guy standing in front of him definitely isn't one of them. Sehun looks at him with pure disdain, questioning if the guy is really trying to start a fight in the middle of the city. Myers is fuming, his silhouette dark against the light of the cafe as he prepares to unleash a spirit-based attack. He screams at Sehun to shut up, and several dark wolf-like shadows manifest from his mana, lunging at Sehun with lethal intent. Sehun doesn't even flinch. He reaches out a hand, his movements precise and calm as the shadow wolves close in. The wolves leap through the air, their jaws wide, but Sehun casually pushes Leia out of the way, his focus entirely on the incoming threat. With a quick flick of his wrist, Sehun uses a small dagger as a medium, shattering the illusionary wolves into blue sparks of mana. He notes that the attack wasn't just pure mana, it had a physical core. Myers is stunned, his face dripping with sweat as he wonders how a freshman managed to dismantle his high-level sorcery so easily. Sehun twirls a small dark ring on his finger, looking completely unimpressed by the subordinate's ultimate move. He smiles, his eyes glowing with a predatory light. He tells Myers that his attack made a delicious sound, and suddenly a red aura flares around Sehun's hand as he activates his gluttonous iron skill. The impact is devastating. A red flash of light fills the screen as Sehun counters with overwhelming force. Myers screams in agony as his weapon and his pride are crushed simultaneously. Sehun licks his lips metaphorically, savoring the taste of the mana he just consumed. The power surge makes his eyes roll back in a moment of pure, blacksmithing ecstasy. A status window appears for gluttonous iron, a top-tier material extracted from his bond with Ryo and Ha. It consumes other iron to generate heat and create mad blood, and it just took a bite out of Myers. The air screams as Sehun activates a burst ring, preparing to end this encounter once and for all. In a blur of speed, Sehun moves through the air, rotating his body to deliver a crushing blow while Myers is still reeling from the mana backlash. A heavy fist connects with Myers' gut, sending him coughing and gasping as the air is forced out of his lungs. The fight is over in seconds. Sehun stands tall over the defeated subordinate, the street behind them looking like a war zone. Leah stares at him, her jaw literally dropping at the sheer dominance he just displayed. Sehun turns back to Leah like nothing happened, casually calling her senior and snapping her out of her trance. He asks her if there's any particular lecture she'd recommend from the enchantment department, his eyes already looking toward his next goal. Leah blushes and stammers, eventually suggesting ancient enchantment. She adds with a cheeky grin that there's a really awesome senior named Leah Claudel teaching there, making Sehun sweat drop at her eccentricity. Meanwhile, a battered and bruised Myers limps away down a dark alley, clutching his stomach. He's reeling from the shock, never expecting a mere freshman to have that kind of terrifying power. He stops dead in his tracks as Erika Ino appears before him, her face as cold as a winter night. He's trembling as he realizes she's been watching the whole time. Erika demands to see the weapon Sehun used. Myers, terrified, hands over the dagger with shaking hands, his head bowed in shame. Erika inspects the blade's edge, her reflection clear in the steel. She tells Myers there's no need to report this to her brother. She'll handle the family head herself, her eyes narrowing with interest. She notes that the weapon has an anti-confiscation enchantment, a high-level security measure. Myers is confused, but Erika is starting to realize just how deep Sehun's secrets go. She wonders if he created a counterskill specifically based on her own family's sorcery theories. A bead of sweat rolls down her face as she realizes Sehun might be a bigger threat, or asset, than she thought. A report is being written. Lee Sehun's aptitude for refining techniques is officially ranked at S or above, a level that shouldn't exist for a student. The report continues, suggesting his sorcery aptitude should be raised to A. In a classroom, Sehun sits with his arms crossed, several daggers laid out on the desk in front of him. A system alert pings. A connection has been established with Erika Ino. Sehun looks up, surprised and slightly annoyed by the sudden notification. He wonders if she was spying on his fight with her subordinate, his sharp eyes scanning the room for any sign of her. He brushes it off, thinking he got some good data anyway. He looks at his daggers, realizing 10 of them are missing after the fight, while a chibi version of him in the corner cries over the lost money. He refocuses on the lecture. He was looking forward to Professor Kim In-cheol's class, but he's currently bored out of his mind listening to theories he mastered decades ago in his past life. Professor Kim In-cheol, a rugged man with a beard, claps his hands and tells the class that the talking is over. It's time to get their hands dirty. He places his hand on a metal ingot, explaining that even if the material is the same, altering the mana array can change its form completely. The metal begins to twist and swirl like liquid, shifting into complex shapes as the professor demonstrates the diversity of weapon applications. He tells the cadets that a true blacksmith must fully grasp the potential of the metal they handle. He slides a row of plain iron ingots toward the students. The class is buzzing with excitement as the professor announces today's practice, metal transformation using these basic iron ingots. Sehun just watches with a bored expression. The task is simple. Manipulate the mana array to create a 3 cm notch in the center of the ingot, then restore it perfectly. The professor warns them that these ingots are extremely sensitive. Sehun realizes the professor isn't just a traditionalist, he uses magical refining too. The time limit is set to 10 minutes. The screen flashes with a single, bold word, begin. Immediately, the classroom falls into chaos. Students are panicking as their metal ingots turn into jagged, messy blobs, refusing to return to their original square shapes. 2 sets of hands slam down on their respective ingots with total confidence. One is wearing a black glove, the other is bare. Hans and Sehun speak at the exact same time. "I'm finished." They glare at each other, the air between them crackling with rivalry. Professor Kim looks impressed, telling the two of them to proceed to the next, much more difficult stage. He projects a complex holographic mana array onto the screen, telling them to apply this specific pattern to their metal. Hans is working like a man possessed, his face sweating as he tries to keep up with Sehun, who is moving with a calm, rhythmic grace. Hans sneaks a look at Sehun's work, thinking their speed is the same. He grits his teeth, believing this is his chance to finally win. The professor throws another curveball, showing an even more insane, spiraling array. This is where most blacksmiths hit a wall. Hans smirks, thinking he's nailed it as his metal begins to take a complex, swirling shape. Beside him, Sehun remains silent, his metal shrouded in a dark, swirling aura. The resulting metal structure is a masterpiece of complex geometry, a perfectly spiraled tower of iron cubes. Hans lets out a triumphant laugh, throwing his head back. He thinks his work is flawless, a perfect execution of the professor's instructions. The professor walks over, his face unreadable as he looks at Hans's work. He calls out his name, Hans Warmut. He gives a simple command: restore the iron ingot to its original form. Hans blinks, his smile fading as he asks, "Excuse me?" Hans tries to push his mana back into the metal, but his face turns pale. The mana array is completely shattered inside the metal. It's trapped in that shape forever. Professor Kim explains that the iron couldn't withstand the transformation. Hans's method was wrong from the very first step. Hans stammers, saying he only did what the professor told him to do. The professor leans in close, reminding him of what he said at the start: you must grasp the potential of the metal, not just follow a blueprint. He tells the whole class that if you can't restore the array, the equipment hasn't transformed, it has deteriorated, it's broken gear. He warns them that this is a major variable in quality. Hans looks down, his pride crushed as he promises to keep that in mind. Hans looks over at Sehun, wondering if the blacksmith brat noticed the trap in the array, or if he just got lucky. Sehun ignores him, his hand hovering over his own complex iron structure. He thinks to himself, as he prepares to move. With a soft sound, Sehun's metal tower melts back into a perfect, smooth liquid before solidifying into its original square ingot shape. The classroom erupts in whispers. The other students are baffled, wondering how he did something the professor just said was practically impossible for a cadet. Professor Kim is staring at Sehun with wide eyes, his composure finally breaking. He calls out, "Cadet Lee Sehun." He asks Sehun to show that transformation one more time. Sehun puts on a fake, polite smile, lying through his teeth that it was only possible because the ingot was adjusted for students. The professor watches as the metal shifts perfectly again, but he's not buying the excuse. He looks at the ingot, his face grim. In his mind, the professor is reeling. He realized Sehun didn't just follow the array, he improved it on the fly, and the professor failed to even notice the subtle change. He thinks about the legendary S-rank hero and blacksmith, Regressed, the artisan of flames who once cleared all floors. His transformation formulas have been the gold standard for decades. Regressed's truth of iron was considered unbreakable by every blacksmith in the world. The professor stares at Sehun, wondering if this freshman just casually broke a legend's record. Sehun walks away as the class ends, thinking to himself that if he breaks that record again, it'll be the second time today. He's got no time for modesty. The sun sets over the Babel Academy building, the sky turning a beautiful shade of purple and orange. As the class clears out, Professor Kim stops Sehun, asking if he has a moment. Sehun pauses, asking what he wants. The professor opens a small ornate box, revealing a glowing red gemstone. He tells Sehun to consider it an entrance gift for choosing Babel. A system window appears. It's a rare grade, highest quality ore that can melt mixed materials into liquid form. The professor explains that if Sehun absorbs the essence of this gem, it will permanently strengthen his crimson flame ability. He heard Sehun was a fire specialist and prepared it just for him. Sehun bows politely, thanking him. He knows this is a massive boost that will help him craft the higher level weapons he needs for the war. But the professor has one more thing. He asks if Sehun would be interested in taking his special elective course. Sehun asks if he means weapon origin studies. The professor is surprised that a freshman even knows the name of such a high-level class. Sehun smiles, knowing it's one of the best-funded and most resource-rich classes in the entire academy. Sehun looks at the professor's face, thinking back to his past life. He had never heard Kim In-cheol's name before his regression, which means this talented man likely met a tragic end before the future war. Sehun agrees to enroll immediately. The professor is shocked, noting that Sehun is already taking an insane number of difficult elective courses. Sehun just shrugs it off, saying this only makes 4 classes in total. The professor is left speechless by the kid's casual attitude toward a workload that would kill a normal student. They shake hands, the professor looking forward to working with him, while a spark of mana passes between them. A system window pops up. Connection with Kim In-cheol is level 1. Sehun extracts a new material, a high-rank metal that can store flames internally. Later that night, Sehun sits in his dark dorm room, reflecting on his progress. He thinks that if metal can be extracted from a person, then a person's body can also be forged like a weapon. He visualizes the mana inside his body. Usually, multiple attributes cause conflict and internal damage, which is why most blacksmiths only stick to one element. But Sehun's eyes glow with a fierce red light. He says, "But I am different," as he holds the crimson flame gem between his hands. He has intentionally exhausted his other mana, so his body is thirsty. His drained body begins to violently draw on the pure essence of the crimson flame gem. A red anatomical diagram of a body appears. Sehun's goal is to construct a mana circuit within himself solely for the crimson flame, turning his own veins into a forge. The process is agonizing. Sehun is drenched in sweat, his skin burning as the raw power of the gem tears through his internal systems. A massive, glowing blue spectral hammer appears above him in the dark room, hovering over the red flames erupting from his body. In a flash of blinding light, Sehun thinks, "And finally, I forge myself." The spectral hammer strikes, and a pillar of fire erupts to the ceiling. The system pings, attribute mana has been strengthened. Crimson Flame has jumped from rank F all the way to rank E+. The rewards keep coming. He has acquired the S-rank skill. His stats, strength, endurance, mana, and agility all take a massive leap forward. Sehun clenches his fist, feeling the new, dense power flowing through his muscles. He's no longer just a weak teenager with a master's mind. He collapses to his knees, gasping for air. A vision of Leah, or perhaps a memory of his future self, mocks him, asking if he really expected to succeed so easily. The vision of a red-haired woman with gold glasses smiles, calling him an idiot for even trying something so dangerous. Sehun just smirks back at the darkness, his eyes burning with resolve. He'll use every single resource, every gem, and every drop of pain available to him to get stronger. Standing alone in his room, he looks out at the night sky. Whether his future holds allies or enemies, this time he won't leave behind any regrets. He's becoming the ultimate weapon. Most blacksmiths are happy just making a weapon that doesn't break, but Sehun is out here trying to rewrite the laws of physics with a hammer. Today at Babel, it's the final day of the smelting session, and the pressure is on for the cadets to deliver something that sets the tone for the entire semester. The instructor reminds everyone that these pieces are being sent out for delivery, both on and off campus, so they better give it their all or they'll be regretting it for the rest of the year. The workshop explodes into action, the sound of hammers hitting anvils ringing through the air as fire roars in the background. Sehun stares at the blade in his hand, clicking his tongue in annoyance. The piece is a total mess because his body couldn't keep up with the precision his mind demanded. He doesn't have the luxury of slow, steady work. He grabs his hammer with a firm grip, ready to force the metal into submission through sheer willpower. He strikes with a rhythmic intensity, sparks flying and flames flickering as he quenches the blade, the steam hissing as the metal begins to align. He lets out a long breath, inspecting the straight edge of the sword. It's not perfect yet, but he's managed to fix the fundamental misalignments. He realizes he won't have time to finish all the pieces to the standard he wants, and he's not the type to settle for good enough. Most students would rush through to get a better budget, but Sehun decides it's better to forge even a single blade properly than a dozen mediocre ones. He begins the final sharpening, the sound of the whetstone echoing with a strange, sharp clarity that signals something special is happening. Suddenly, a vision of crashing waves fills his mind. It's the sound of the world itself shifting as his master-level skills finally begin to manifest in this timeline. He calls it the sound of the world crumbling. It's the moment when the soul of the blacksmith perfectly synchronizes with the steel. Whenever he hears this, he knows he's created something great. Not just a temporary sharpness, but a lethal edge etched into the very core of the blade. A brilliant white light flares as the white light greatsword is completed, and the system confirms that Sehun has surpassed elite levels, granting him a new skill. The resulting sword is a rare-grade masterpiece with high quality, a pure white edge designed to sync perfectly with mana circuits for a fierce, sharp aura. Sehun looks at his work and shrugs, thinking it's just passable since he only used common iron, while the student next to him looks like he's about to cry from intimidation. A small, confident smile plays on Sehun's lips as he feels his pre-regression skills returning to him bit by bit. Behind him, the other cadets are having a full-blown existential crisis, wondering if they should just drop out after seeing the monster Sehun has become. The next morning, Sehun meets up with Leia at a cafe, and she's surprised that a top smelting student actually wants to see her enchantment process. Sehun tells her he's curious about her fundamentals, but as they walk, he notices they're heading into a pretty secluded part of the city. They walk along a dirt path through green fields, heading toward a small rustic workshop that looks like it's been there for decades. They arrive at the Akalkup Smithy, a humble-looking place that seems way too quiet for a genius of Leah's caliber to be working at. Leah kicks open the door and shouts for her grandma, her energetic voice bouncing off the wooden walls. She calls out that she's back as she walks past rows of hanging pans and kitchenware. An older woman with silver hair and a sharp gaze looks up, annoyed, telling Leah she's not deaf and to quit the shouting. The grandma, Helena, immediately spots Sehun and asks if he's Leah's boyfriend, which gets an instant blushy not a chance from both of them. Sehun introduces himself as the top Borsippa student, but Helena just scoffs, muttering that Babel is doomed if they're letting in soft-looking brats like him. Sehun keeps his cool, identifying himself as a first year in the smelting department while Helena sizes him up with a critical eye. She tells Leah to quit wasting time and get to work because they've got a mountain of orders to finish thanks to the new freshman class. Helena points the way to the back workshop, and as she walks past him, Sehun feels an aura of immense skill coming off the old woman. Sehun realizes Helena's skills are even better than he expected, and he can't figure out why a master like her is running a simple hardware shop. Leah shows off her enchantment palette, a tray full of powders made from ground-up mana stones in every color imaginable. Sehun notes that while most use 8 colors, Leah's variety is insane. He asks if her job is to restore damaged enchantment formulas using these powders. Leah shouts, "Bingo!" with a huge grin, excited that he actually understands the complexity of her work. She explains that this is how she earns money and practices without worrying about the cost of materials. She begins to channel her mana, and the powders start to glow. A golden streak of mana flows from her brush, looking like liquid light as she prepares to apply it to a common pan. Her concentration is absolute as she guides the glowing energy with a steady hand. The pan lights up with a complex geometric array. She's literally turning everyday kitchenware into high-end tools through master-level enchantment. Sehun watches her, thinking about how he heard the department was in a slump, and he realizes the current head is a total failure compared to Leah. He recalls seeing a student begging on the floor earlier, and now that he sees Leah in action, he thinks he knows exactly why the department is struggling. He watches her lose herself in the work, her eyes wide with focus as she applies a second layer of glowing orange mana. Sehun gives a small, genuine smile, thinking that the ability to get lost in your work like that is a rare talent in itself. He wanders over to a crate in the corner and spots something that catches his eye, a whetstone that resonates with mana circuits. His hands start itching to work. He tells Helena he wants to try engraving white light for the first time in a long while. Helena challenges him, telling him to pick any item from the pile of scrap if he thinks he's actually capable of it. Sehun nods, thinking that if he gets to use a custom whetstone of that caliber, he might as well show off a little. He reaches into the pile and pulls out a simple, dull kitchen knife, his grip firm and professional. Helena watches him with crossed arms, questioning his choice of such a basic, mundane tool. Sehun holds the knife up, noting that the edge is perfectly aligned and the axis isn't warped. It feels like a blade made by someone who actually knows how to use a sword. He chooses a whetstone with perfectly compressed mana particles, thinking that whoever made this knife can handle a blade sharpened to its absolute limit. He begins to sharpen, the metal singing against the stone as white sparks fly, the white light aura beginning to coat the kitchen knife. Helena's expression softens into one of genuine shock. She can't believe a freshman has this kind of refined, heavy-handed technique. Suddenly, Leah erupts with a done and jumps into the air, holding her finished pan like a trophy. She blinks, noticing her grandma standing right there, and Helena just sighs at her granddaughter's lack of situational awareness. Leah teases her grandma, saying it looks like she tried to find a flaw in Sehun and got put in her place instead. Helena tells her to shut up and gives Leah a sharp flick to the forehead that sends her glasses flying, definitely a master of physical strikes too. Helena turns back to Sehun, asking if he's finished, her tone much more respectful now. Sehun hands over the kitchen knife with a modest smile, saying it's the best he can do for now, but he'll be better next time. Helena takes the blade and tells them both to head out, her eyes already glued to the incredible work Sehun just did. Leah drags Sehun away, complaining that her grandma's just being cranky for no reason, while Sehun looks back at the workshop one last time. Helena stands alone in the quiet shop, staring at the knife Sehun sharpened. The quality is so high, it's actually scary. Suddenly, the door bursts open and a loud, boisterous man in a pinstripe suit yells out for his sis, asking if she's in the middle of smelting. Helena tells him to keep it down. The man, a professor from the swordsmanship department, says he's got a backlog of orders and needs his kitchen knife back. Helena asks when he's going to quit that restaurant gig, reminding him he's a lead professor, but he just tells her to mind her own hobbies. He spots the knife Sehun worked on and grabs it, ready to head back to his kitchen. He stops, staring at the edge with a look of pure confusion, asking Helena if she sharpened this while she was drunk again because the quality is unreal. Helena calmly tells him she didn't do it. It was a freshman who just enrolled this year. The professor is stunned, but Helena doubles down, her voice serious as she confirms the kid is only a first year. Sehun is shown walking back under the bright blue sky, his face calm. He has no idea he just blew the mind of one of the academy's top professors. As they walk back, Sehun asks Leia about her grandma, and she reveals that Helena actually used to be a professor of metallurgy before retiring 5 years ago. Sehun asks if there was a specific story behind her retirement, but Leah says it was nothing special as far as she knows. Sehun realizes that quite a few professors have left that department lately, and since he knows it becomes the weakest department at Babel in the future, he decides this isn't something to ignore. Leah clings to his arm, eagerly asking what he thought of her enchantment. Sehun tells her it was good and her fundamentals are solid. She's over the moon, but Sehun quickly brings her back to Earth, telling her that her thinking is still way too narrow. He points out that she clearly thought of a better method for the enchantment but chose not to use it, which leaves Leia completely shocked that he saw through her. He tells her that knowing a better way and still not doing it is a serious problem. He warns her that she's suppressing her own imagination, which is her greatest weapon. Leah's eyes shadow over behind her glasses as she mutters that she already knows that, clearly struggling with some internal limitation. Sehun lets out a sigh, reaching into his uniform and telling her he doesn't have much time, so she needs to pay attention. He draws a small dagger, his expression becoming dead serious as Leah watches with bated breath. He uses a metaphor. If forging is placing a stone beneath the water, then enchantment is carving the image of that submerged stone above the water's surface. He calls out Crimson Lotus, and a red, flame-like aura begins to swirl around the blade, looking like a blooming flower of fire. Then, he adds a second layer, white radiance flow, and a swirling white energy mixes with the red, leaving Leah completely mesmerized. He explains the secret. The enhancement shouldn't just be on the exterior, it needs to exist beneath the surface of the weapon's mana structure. If one layer isn't enough, he says, then divide it into layers. He looks at her with an intense gaze, handing her the secret to revolutionary enchanting. To prove his point, he flips the dagger and plunges it into the ground with a sudden, sharp motion. The ground doesn't just break, the energy flows through the earth like a living thing. The crimson lotus aura trickles down, a wave of lethal killing intent spreading through the roots and the dirt. He tells her it can't really be called a proper enchantment yet, but he sees a glimmer in Leah's eyes that tells him she's already starting to pave her own path. Suddenly, Leah snaps out of it and screams, "Junior!" She grabs his shoulders, her face inches from his, begging to borrow the dagger. She starts shaking him like a rag doll, promising she'll remake it properly and return it if he just lets her study it. Sehun's sweat drops, saying he doesn't mind, and even offers her a set of specialized materials to go with it. Leah literally jumps for joy, shouting "I love you" with hearts flying everywhere as she runs off with her new treasure. Sehun is left standing in the park, looking a bit dazed by her sudden exit and the sheer energy she left behind. A system alert pings. Connection with Leia Claudel is level 1. Sehun smiles to himself, thinking about how young and full of potential she is compared to the haunted genius he knew in the future. Later, Sehun enters a massive arena, the Martial Hall, where the crowd is buzzing about a ranking match between the young mad dog and a demon god. He stops and realizes someone is following him. It's Erika Inno, lurking right behind him as usual. He asks if she'll leave if he tells her to, and she just stares back. She claims she'll watch from a distance, but Sehun knows she's going to be right on his heels regardless. He sighs and heads into the stands, his Societe Contact Stone and Miss Explosion Catalyst ores glowing faintly in his inventory as he moves. The system displays the new ores he's extracted, one that adjusts internal mana arrangements and another that maximizes the potential of mixed materials. The arena lights up, and a giant screen shows a bubbly girl welcoming the new students to the pride of the Martial Hall, the ranking match. The host introduces herself as Lan Fang, the youngest professor of the martial arts department, flashing a peace sign to the cheering crowd. She tells the crowd to get ready as she begins to introduce today's main event competitors. A spotlight hits the arena floor, revealing a tall woman with long blonde hair standing with her back to the audience, a thin sword at her side. Lan Fang announces her as the top senior, a 3-year champion of the Martial Hall and an active A-rank hero, the flawless superhuman. The screen calls her the Holy Sword Master who conquered the hero's tower. She turns around with a serene, confident look. It's Aria Myers, and the sheer pressure she emits is felt throughout the entire stadium. The crowd goes absolutely wild, guys screaming, "Nuna, take me!" while Sehun and Erika watch with much more analytical expressions. Next, the host introduces the challenger, the successor of the Flame Wheel Withering Blossom Spear. It's Yeom Seong-ha, a 3rd-year rising star and rank 10 in the hall. Sehun's eyes sharpen, thinking, so we finally meet. The word MAD flashes on the screen as the fight begins with a violent eruption of power. Yeom Seong-ha's eyes glow with a cold blue light as he prepares to launch his first strike. The arena is filled with explosions of fire and light as the spear and sword clash at high speeds. Yeom Seong-ha moves with desperate intensity, his spear becoming a wheel of flames as he tries to break through Aria's defense. Aria Myers, however, is completely unfazed. She moves with an elegant, almost dancing grace, a small smirk on her face as she deflects every attack. Yeom Seong-ha lunges forward with everything he's got, but Aria catches his spear on her blade, the force creating a massive burst of golden light. Yeom Seong-ha grits his teeth, his face contorted in frustration as he realizes his best move didn't even make her break a sweat. He tries to reignite his flames, but the gap in their basic power levels is just too wide. Aria's eyes glow with a terrifying golden light. She spins her sword, creating a perfect circle of fire around her that cancels out his technique. In a flash, she moves past his guard, the tip of her sword hovering inches from his throat before he can even react. Sehun watches from the stands, thinking that for a successor of such a legendary spear style, Yeom Seong-ha is performing way below standard. He notes that while many things bother him about the fight, the biggest problem is the weapon Seong-ha is using. It's holding him back. Yeom Seong-ha lets out a final, desperate shout as he tries one last lunge, but it's over. Aria's blade is perfectly positioned at his neck, the sharp steel reflecting his defeated expression. The stadium goes silent as Seong-ha realizes he's been completely outclassed. He lowers his head, admitting his defeat with a quiet, hollow voice. Aria sheathes her sword and gives him a polite good work, her face returning to its calm, champion-like mask. The host screams that the match is concluded and the winner is Aria Myers, as the crowd erupts into thunderous applause. Lan Fang tries to start the post-match interviews, but she's interrupted as Yeom Seong-ha immediately exits the arena, clearly in no mood for talk. Aria laughs it off, saying even for her, fighting a rank 9 right after this would be tough, playing up her charm for the fans. She offers a Q&A session instead, and the crowd goes even crazier, but Seong-ha is already gone, walking away with his head down. Sehun watches Seongha leave, thinking the brat is in a bad mood, and he stands up to leave as well. Erika is surprised that he's leaving without watching the rest, but Sehun just tells her he's not into this type of display. He walks away, calling the champion annoying, while Erika watches him go, her curiosity about this freshman growing by the second. She's relieved he didn't come to see her brother, but she wonders why he seems so angry after watching a top-tier fight. Down in the arena, Aria Myers suddenly stops and looks up toward the stands, her long blonde hair flowing in the wind. The camera zooms into her eye, where the reflection of Sehun's retreating figure is visible. She thinks to herself that perhaps there is one, someone who actually saw through her flawless performance. Sehun knows that if you want to tame a wild dog, you can't just throw him a bone, you have to show him you're the alpha. He tracks Yeom Seongha to a quiet park near the martial arts hall where the air is still thick with the spearman's frustration. Seongha is sitting on the steps, letting out a long, exhausted sigh after his crushing defeat against Aria Myers. Sehun looks at him, thinking about the living Yeom Seongha, not the hardened soldier he knew in the future, but a kid currently drowning in his own inadequacy. In the original timeline, Seongha was the backbone of the humanity's final death squad, known for a nasty personality but unmatched bravery. He was the hero who threw his life away just to take down the archdevil of the Sea of Ruin. Sehun is here to make sure he doesn't have to die like that this time. Sehun approaches, wondering if he can get the affinity stone from Seongha peacefully since the kid hasn't gone off the deep end yet. Seongha senses him and asks if he was watching the match. Sehun admits he saw it, and Seongha is actually impressed that a freshman managed to track him down to this secluded spot. But the mood shifts instantly when Seongha realizes he's looking at the top student of the Borsipa department, the blacksmith brat everyone is talking about. Sehun tries to keep it civil, hoping they can just talk for a moment, but Seongha's eyes fill with a dark, brooding intensity. Seongha turns his back, coldly telling Sehun to get lost before things get ugly. Sehun keeps walking forward, insisting that this conversation will benefit both of them, but Seongha has heard enough. Seongha snaps, yelling that he hates weaklings who think they're his equal just because they have a bit of mediocre talent. He tells Sehun to forget whatever he wanted to say and go home. He spits out the word blacksmith like it's a slur, his pride as a warrior clearly wounded after his loss in the arena. Sehun just smirks, thinking Seongha is actually a gentleman compared to the mad dog he was in the future, even though the kid is currently screaming at him to know his place. Realizing words are useless with this guy, Sehun's hand begins to glow with a bright, concentrated mana. If a fight is what it takes to get Seongha's attention, he's ready. Sehun stops and tells Seongha one thing. If he continues like this, the legacy of his flame wheel residual ember spear will end with him. That hits a nerve. Seongha's face twists in rage, his aura flaring red as he prepares to strike the insolent freshman. In a blur of speed, Seongha lunges forward, his fist aimed right for Sehun's head with lethal intent. Sehun doesn't dodge, he clenches his own fist, a strange blue light swirling around his arm as he prepares a counter-move. As Seongha's punch comes inches from his face, Sehun catches it, his hands glowing as a system notification appears. The system pings. Affinity imprint Steel Seeker is activating. A massive shockwave of orange and white energy explodes between them, the force of the collision cracking the ground beneath their feet. Seongha is floored. He can't believe a blacksmith just deflected a punch infused with his master-level mana. Seongha looks at Sehun through a new lens, realizing the top student title wasn't just for show. Maybe this kid is actually worth talking to. But Sehun isn't done. He points out the mana trails, the residual embers, still lingering in the air from Seongha's attack. He tells Seongha that this is the end for him, holding a swirling ball of Seongha's own fire mana right in front of him. Sehun unleashes a burst of power, a pillar of fire erupting into the sky as Seongha watches in total disbelief. The smoke clears, leaving a trail of embers falling like snow around the two of them. Sehun lets out a calm breath, looking completely unbothered, while Seongha stands there trembling. Seongha is losing his mind. Those embers are his unique mana signature. They should only respond to him. He can't understand how they're in Sehun's hands. He realizes the horrifying truth. His own technique wasn't just parried, it was stolen right out of the air. Sehun looks at him with a predatory smile, knowing he's successfully dismantled Seongha's ego. Seongha is about to lose it completely, a purple, demonic-looking aura beginning to swell around him as his mad dog persona starts to take over. Sehun remembers the stories of the Flame Blossom Sect massacre and realizes it probably happened because of a temper exactly like this. Seongha lunges again, but Sehun notes that his Steel Seeker effect is almost up and his physical body is hitting its limit. Since a peaceful connection is clearly off the table, Sehun decides he'll just have to crush the spearman into submission. Another massive explosion of energy rocks the park as the two clash again, white light meeting dark purple flames. They end up in a deadlock, hands locked as they glare at each other, sweat and soot covering their faces. Suddenly, A voice breaks the tension, calling out Jake Myers. Sehun looks over to see the blonde freshman standing there, looking terrified. Jake stammers, asking Seonga if he knows the top Borsipa student. Seonga just trembles with rage, unable to finish the fight. Seonga stares at Sehun for a long, silent moment, his breathing heavy as his aura slowly fades away. He finally just mutters go, and Jake doesn't need to be told twice, shouting his thanks and grabbing Sehun to get the hell out of there. As Jake drags him away, Sehun tries to tell Seonga to remember what he said, but Jake tells him to shut up and just run before they both get murdered. Seonga stands alone in the park, looking at his hands. He's reeling with guilt, realizing he almost put the reputation of his sect and his master in jeopardy because he lost his cool. A single bead of sweat rolls down his face as he contemplates the mystery of the freshman who stole his fire. Back at the academy, Jake is chewing Sehun out, asking him what he was thinking picking a fight with a legendary senior like that. He tells Sehun he would have died if Jake hadn't intervened. Sehun just smiles casually, saying that dying is a bit of an exaggeration, which only frustrates Jake more. A system window pops up. A connection with Yeom Seonga has been established. Sehun is already planning his next move for affinity extraction. Sehun looks at a tarot-like card showing the future Mad Dog. He realizes that if Seonga is this soft now, the stone he extracts might have different properties. He needs to find a way to raise their affinity level properly. Sehun looks at Jake, thinking the blonde kid is actually proving to be pretty useful too. He asks if Jake's hand is okay after breaking up the fight. Jake flashes a bright smile, showing off a small bruise and bragging that his hands are tougher than any other part of his body. Sehun nods, noting the tough hands, then shifts the topic to something more pressing. He asks Jake what he said about his big sister, Arya Myers, back at the arena. Sehun bluntly says that Arya is a bit of a jerk, which sends Jake into a total panic. Jake reveals that his sister has been asking all sorts of questions about Sehun. Sehun stops in his tracks as Jake tells him the terrifying news. Arya Myers has actually taken a personal interest in him. Sehun stares ahead, a phantom image of Arya Myers looming over him. Jake is baffled, wondering how his sister could have heard anything Sehun said from way up in the noisy stands. He shivers, thinking about her sharp ears. Sehun tells Jake to relax. This is exactly what he wanted. He knows Seonga's biggest obsession is beating Arya, so if Sehun is the one getting her attention, it'll make him stand out more to Seonga. Jake warns him not to take it lightly. He starts to say that his sister is petty and scheming, but Sehun finishes the sentence for him. Jake's head spins as he realizes Sehun actually has his sister figured out, which is a very dangerous place to be. Sehun looks down, his expression darkening. He wonders what Arya could have possibly done for him to dislike her this much. He remembers the future version of the Holy Swordmaster, a beautiful warrior who looked like an angel on the battlefield. But back then, even her legendary sword wasn't enough. Sehun recalls that her weapon wasn't anything special in the face of the true apocalypse. One day, the Holy Swordmaster simply vanished. In her place, a monster appeared. A woman who used a demon god's own remains as her blade. She became the demon god of annihilating light. Sehun tells Jake he just doesn't like her face and waves goodbye, walking away down the city street. Jake is left standing there, completely lost, wondering what on earth could have happened between a freshman and his world-famous sister. Suddenly, Jake's phone pings with a new message. It's from Arya. Looks like I've made an interesting friend. I'll keep telling you about him from now on. Jake realizes with a groan that he's officially been recruited as the middleman. Another message pops up, and Jake's eyes widen in fear. Arya sends a favor from his petty, scheming big sis, her text accompanied by a dark, snake-like aura that makes Jake's skin crawl. Jake stands alone in the alley, shouting "damn it" into the wind. His life just got a whole lot more complicated. The next morning, Sehun is back in a lecture hall at Babel, rubbing his neck and thinking he might have pushed his body too hard in his fight with Seonga. Suddenly, the door bangs open and a tiny old man in a tuxedo and top hat comes flying into the room on a motorized cart. The man introduces himself as Reese Doba. He announces he'll be in charge of their major classes for the next 2 weeks, and the subject is attribute smithing. The students whisper that this professor is a famous lunatic. He ignores the chatter and starts handing out evaluations and budgets for the previous semester's work. He goes through the list one by one, calling out names until he reaches the very last one. He calls for Lee Sehun. Hans, the blonde rival, watches with envy, assuming Sehun is about to get a budget 3 times larger than his own. But Professor Doba drops a bombshell. You don't have a budget yet. Sehun is stunned, asking sorry? The professor explains that Sehun's white light greatsword was so well made that they decided to put it up for auction with the second-year students this Wednesday. Sehun realizes this is likely a scheme by Vice Dean Michael to pull his work out for a separate valuation. He's not happy about being used as a showpiece. But he figures if Professor Kim In-cheol didn't stop it, it should be fine. He gives a polite nod of understanding. Professor Doba moves on, announcing that today they'll be dealing with residual mana. He calls for a volunteer assistant to come in. The door opens and in walks Yom Seongha. The classroom erupts in shock at the sight of the legendary third-year spearman acting as a temporary TA. The students are buzzing, wondering why a combat star like him is in a smithing class, while Sehun just watches with a knowing look. The professor tells everyone to focus on the concepts before they start practicing, and Seongha stands stoically by his side. Doba explains that residual mana in weapons comes in two forms, the basic charge type and the much harder independent type that generates its own mana. He notes that independent types are far harder to make because there's no fixed standard for building a mana core. It changes based on the maker and the material. He tells the class they'll all be starting with the charge type and gestures to his assistant to demonstrate. Seongha's hand begins to glow with an intense, fiery red aura. The professor explains that fire mana is volatile and tricky, but if you can suppress its explosive nature, its sustain is incredible. He points to the swirling rings of fire Seongha is maintaining. The students are in awe of the flame wheel blossoming spear technique, wondering how anyone can control fire mana to that extreme degree. Professor Doba tells them to make the most of having such a great TA and announces that their first assignment is due next Thursday. The theme for the assignment is displayed on the board, leaving the students to decide what they want to create within that framework. The professor tells everyone to head to the forge and change their clothes, his mechanical cart whirring as he leads the way. As the class clears out, several students see this as their chance to finally talk to the famous Yom Seongha. Hans approaches with a confident smile and an outstretched hand, greeting him with a good day, senpai. Seongha doesn't even look at him, simply telling him to beat it with an aura so terrifying that Hans practically turns into a ghost. The other students scurry away like mice, leaving Seongha alone in the hallway. Seongha watches as Sehun walks toward the exit without saying a word. He finally calls out, "Lee Sehun." Sehun pauses at the door, asking Seongha what exactly he thinks he knows about him. Sehun turns around and reveals a secret. A spearman's level is measured by how many wheels of fire they can maintain. He notes that the A-rank head of Seongha's sect can reach 8 wheels. He points out that Seongha was just holding 3 wheels with room to spare, meaning he could probably maintain 6 if he tried. Sehun then drops the hammer. "You reached 7 wheels once, didn't you?" Seongha freezes, his face going pale with shock. Sehun continues, stating that one day Seongha suddenly couldn't hold them anymore. Seongha is reeling. He never even told his gatemaster about his slump. He can't fathom how Sehun knows. Sehun explains that he's fairly talented with fire himself, and watching Seongha's flames, he could tell something was just off. He tells Seongha that it looks like he's got plenty of power in reserve, but he's afraid to let it fully explode, flinging his mana around half-heartedly instead. Seongha desperately asks if Sehun knows the cause of his stagnation. Sehun gives a small nod, saying he's got a guess. Seongha gulps, hanging on every word, but then Sehun shrugs, saying he doesn't really see a reason to tell Seongha for free. The spearman is stunned by the sudden cold shoulder. Seongha clenches his fist, desperate for the answer. He tells Sehun to name his price, he'll do whatever it takes. Sehun holds up one finger. "First, you'll pay a fair price for every bit of advice and help I give you." He holds up a second finger. "Whenever you run into something you can't judge on your own, you'll come and talk to me." He's effectively recruiting Seongha as his personal agent. Sehun tells him to decide before they reach the forge and starts walking away again, leaving the mad dog in his wake. Seongha doesn't hesitate for long. He shouts, "I'll do it!" his face filled with a mix of fear and hope. Sehun looks back over his shoulder with a sharp, satisfied smirk. He tells Seongha that's fine, as long as he can show Seongha the proof he needs. The master blacksmith has officially caught his first big fish. It's another afternoon in the forging room, but the air feels different today. Something big is about to be hammered out. The other students are whispering, watching our boy Sehun like he's lost his mind. They can't believe he's about to start forging without even looking at a blueprint. He's just moving on pure instinct. He tosses the fire and dark attribute ores into the pot, hitting a perfect 7-to-3 ratio as the flames roar to life. The onlookers think he's throwing away mana, wondering why a top student would make such a rookie mistake. But Sehun's eyes are locked in. He's waiting for that exact moment the elemental mana starts to leak out. He tightens his gloves, the heat radiating off the forge as he prepares to do the impossible. He's performing thermal displacement, a high-level technique to force the metal to absorb 2 opposing manas at once. Sehun smirks, knowing that while others see basic smithing, Seongha is about to see a whole new world of power. Seongha watches intently, his eyes widening as he realizes Sehun isn't just making a weapon, he's teaching a lesson. Sehun works the bellows, keeping the fire mana spreading outward while the dark mana burrows deep into the core. This creates a perfect circle, a balance that keeps the 2 powers from destroying each other. Seeing this, Seonga has a breakthrough. He realizes his forbidden dark mana was never a curse. It was just waiting for the right container. He gets a bit awkward, admitting his mastery actually dropped to the fifth wheel because of the internal conflict. He shows Sehun the black flame wheels he's managed to form. They're fewer, but way more potent than regular ones. But there's a problem. The Manhwa sect is sending an instructor tomorrow to check his progress. If he can't show at least a sixth wheel, he'll be stripped of his status and kicked out of the sect forever. He tries to go back to the old way, but his mana goes wild. He's lost control over the dark attribute entirely. Sehun realizes they're on a tight clock. The instructor arrives tomorrow, and Seonga is currently a mess. Sehun goes into deep thought. He needs a shortcut, a way to bridge the gap in just 24 hours. He reaches out and grabs Seonga's shoulder, a confident look in his eyes. He asks if Seonga is willing to do whatever it takes to stay the successor, and Seonga doesn't hesitate. He's all in. Sehun's eye flashes. He's got the plan, and it's going to be legendary. He pulls out the Crimson Resonance Black Stone. It's a high-grade ore that's perfect for stabilizing Seonga's chaotic mana. They head to the private training room in the martial arts hall, a place reserved only for the elite top 100. Sehun calls him a show-off but immediately gets to work, tweaking the room's settings for their training. The digital interface glitches and shifts, transforming the room into a perfect replica of the Manhwa sect. Seonga looks around, feeling a bit homesick, but Sehun is already focused on the next step. Sehun holds up the glowing resonance stone. This isn't just a material, it's the key to Seonga's evolution. With a sharp click, Sehun begins the infusion process, the energy sparking between his fingers. The system confirms the bond. The Crimson Resonance Black Stone is of the highest quality, designed to make mana vibrate and sync. Sehun hands over 2 short spears, with the stones embedded in them. Seonga thinks dual wielding is crude, but Sehun knows better. The instructions are simple, but brutal. Flame wheel in the left hand, raw dark mana in the right. Seonga takes a deep breath, closing his eyes to focus his inner energy. He bursts into motion, his flames swirling around him as he tries to maintain the balance. Suddenly, a blast of energy shocks him. The 2 manas are clashing, and it's hitting him hard. Sehun points out that he's subconsciously letting the dark mana leak into the fireside, ruining the flow. Since Seong has spent years suppressing the dark power, his body is naturally fighting against using it. Sehun tells him to get used to it. Once he handles both simultaneously, the 6th wheel will be a walk in the park. Seonga realizes the gear Sehun gave him is top tier. He can feel his control tightening. 3 hours into the grind, the room is a whirlwind of fire and shadow as Seonga pushes his limits. He's moving like a demon, the dual spears carving paths of destruction through the air. Sehun watches from the sidelines, impressed. Seonga is adapting way faster than expected. Sehun starts analyzing every move, the breathing, the muscle shifts, everything. He's looking at the center of gravity, collecting data like a master craftsman would. He watches how the mana circulates and releases at the tip of the spear, noting every flaw. Seonga catches him staring and gets a bit self-conscious, but Sehun just calls it data collection. He tells Seonga he needs this info to forge the ultimate weapon specifically for him. Sehun plays it cool, saying it's just for a class assignment, making Seonga act all tsundere about it. But then, Sehun asks the real question. Why is being the successor so important to him? Seonga goes quiet for a second. He simply says he's following his master's will. To Seonga, it's not about power, it's about duty and honoring the man who raised him. You see, Seonga was an orphan with nothing until he was adopted by a legend. That man was Yeom Jinhaeon, the first leader of the sect and a genuine hero. Even though Jinhaeon is retired and injured now, he's still the absolute center of Seonga's world. Sehun watches the bond level rise to 3. He realizes Seonga is the perfect material to become a guardian of humanity. Seonga looks at Sehun, finally asking why he's putting in all this effort to help him. Sehun doesn't answer immediately, his face hidden in shadow as he thinks about the future. He's thinking about the 6 great demon realms, nightmare lands filled with beasts that humanity can't touch yet. Sehun plans to conquer all of them, and for that he needs powerful warriors to stand by his side. He jokes that a sect leader will have plenty of money to buy his weapons, making Seonga call him materialistic. Sehun just shrugs. He's not a charity, he's building an army, and armies need funding. Seonga realizes Sehun isn't kidding. There's a price for this level of god-tier support. Sehun's offer is clear. He'll make Seonga the sect leader, and in return, Seonga will follow him into hell. In Sehun's mind, the deal is simple. He makes the weapons, and his warriors kill the gods. Seonga lets out a short laugh. He likes the ambition, even if it sounds insane. He holds up the resonance stone, asking Sehun if he's sure he won't regret tying himself to a mad dog. Sehun's expression turns predatory. He promises to make him the leader even if Seonga hates every second of it. The energy between them flares, a contract written in fire and shadow. The system pings. The Karma seal for the Crimson Resonance Stone is officially activated. We're at the Flavium First Floor Common Training Ground. The air is thick with tension. The stage is set for a confrontation that will decide Seonga's entire future. Kong Hyun-woon, a smug 7th ring instructor, arrives looking like he's already won. He brought along a group of disciples just to witness Seonga's supposed humiliation. He starts sucking up, calling Seonga the next most outstanding person, which is a backhanded compliment if I've ever heard one. Seonga snaps back, telling him to watch his mouth. The next clan master hasn't been decided, and he's not going down without a fight. Kang offers a test of skills, but Seonga isn't interested in a basic warm-up. He drops a bombshell. He's applying for the 7th ring promotion right now. The instructor can't believe the idiot has the guts. Kang remembers his orders from the higher-ups. If Seonga challenges him, he's to show no mercy and break him. He warns Seonga that the 7th ring requires actual sparring, but Seonga just tells him he talks too much. Kang snaps. He's tired of the disrespect and calls for his spear, ready to put this young master in his place. The match is domain sparring, a pure struggle of wills where the stronger flame ring crushes the weaker one. Seonga crosses his dual spears, his eyes glowing with a newfound terrifying intensity. Kang laughs at the short spears, calling them crude, but his smile vanishes the second Seongha releases his mana. Seongha lunges forward, a blur of motion that catches the instructor completely off guard. Kang screams about filthy flames, claiming the dark-tainted fire won't be recognized by the sect. Seonga doesn't care about their rules anymore. He's got 5 rings of black fire swirling behind him, and they look lethal. Kang roars that Seonga will regret this, swinging his massive spear with everything he's got. The impact shakes the entire room, a massive explosion of light and heat as their manas collide. Sehun watches from the back, completely calm. He knows exactly how this ends. The black flames start to swallow the orange ones. It's not even a contest. Kang is horrified. He can feel his own pure flame ring being dismantled by Seonga's dark energy. It's not just being overpowered, it's being ripped apart and devoured. With a series of loud cracks, Kang's spear shatters into pieces under the pressure. The instructor falls to his knees, broken and defeated in front of all his disciples. Seonga stands over him, dual spears at the ready. Crude, huh? Who's laughing now? Sehun walks over, commenting on the waste of materials. Seongha explains that once the ceremony is held, he'll be the formal successor. But Sehun wants to know the next step. How does he become the actual clan master? There are 2 conditions. Reach the 8th ring and get the majority of the instructors to back him. Seongha plans to take their consent by force through more sparring matches. He knows it won't be as easy as today. Sehun starts walking away, confident that Seongha will clear it easily. Today was proof enough. He tells Seongha to just worry about how he's going to pay the bill for all this help in the future. Seongha promises to provide whatever Sehun needs, cash, materials, anything within his power. But then Seongha says he wants to commission another weapon already. He looks at the temporary spears and wonders. If Sehun made these in a few hours, what could he make with actual time? A small, genuine smile touches Seongha's face. He's finally found someone he can truly trust. He points a spear at Sehun's back, demanding a more useful weapon, and Sehun just tells him to get that thing out of his face. The bond level hits level 2. Their relationship is officially established as a transaction. This means every time they trade, a new bond stone is created and matured. Sehun's farm is growing. Meanwhile, across the academy, the big auction house is packed. The energy in the room is electric. The announcer takes the stage, kicking off the regular auction for the Faculty of Technology. Erika Ino is there, noticing a ton of important people in the crowd. Sehun's valedictorian title has drawn a huge audience. Professor Kim In-cheol looks tense. He knows that being in the spotlight makes them a target for their enemies. A schemer named Michael is watching from the shadows, hoping to seize control of the department. They reveal the test Seo Jumpo, a fabric made from white tiger fur. It's as hard as steel and resists all slashing attacks. It's a death trap for swords. If a blade hits this, it usually chips or goes dull instantly. The crowd watches as a tester prepares to strike. This is designed to make any great sword look like junk. Defective products are easily identified here, and they're planning to use this to humiliate Sehun. The first few swords go up and fail to make a mark. The tension is building. Erika asks Sehun if he knows what they're up to. She can tell this is a setup. Sehun explains the trick. White tiger fur isn't just hard, it's complex. The fur actually mimics the sharpness of the weapon it touches, eating away at the blade's durability. Erica realizes Sehun's sword is at a massive disadvantage. High sharpness usually means low durability. Sehun smirks. He knows this is a blatant attempt to ruin his and Professor Kim's reputation. He's not worried though. He says that's only a problem if the sword wasn't made properly. Finally, it's time for sword number 36, the White Light Greatsword by the freshman prodigy Lee Sehun. The tester swings, and the blade flashes with a brilliant blinding light. A sharp clack echoes through the hall. The crowd gasps as the blade passes through. Everyone is stunned into silence. What on earth just happened? Did Sehun just break the unbreakable cloth? Just when everyone thinks the show is over, Sehun steps forward to drop some knowledge. He asks if he can explain what just happened, walking onto the stage with total confidence while the crowd whispers his name. He explains that normally, a sword focused only on sharpness would shatter against the tiger fur cloth, but his white light longsword is different. It gathers mana from the very air and condenses it into a microscopic, razor-thin edge. The audience is confused. Most people can't even feel the mana he's talking about, but Sehun just smiles like he's explaining math to toddlers. He calls it sharpness aura. It's too dense to be just light, but too sharp to be called regular sword energy. Erika looks up from her seat, realizing that the incredible phenomenon they just saw was all part of Sehun's plan. Sehun explains that when identical sharpness auras clash, they don't cancel out, they resonate, making the blade even stronger. He pulls out a jagged, crystal-like ore, telling the crowd he's about to do something interesting right there on stage. It's the social link stone he got from Erica. It's a high-rank ore that can perfectly tune and organize internal mana. Our boy activates the bond imprint, his hand glowing as he presses the ore against the blade. You can see the mana fluctuating, the sword literally vibrating as it adjusts to its new, optimal state. He drags the blade across the test cloth again, but this time, he's adding a clear path for the energy to flow. With one smooth motion, a massive surge of blue light erupts, slicing through the air like butter. The system pings. The White Light Longsword has just jumped to rare rank. It's more powerful, more durable, and has a new reinforcement skill. Sehun scoffs, saying a regular whetstone wasn't good enough for his work anyway. He's basically flexed on every other blacksmith in the room. He turns to the auctioneer and tells him he better update the starting price to reflect the new rank. The price jumps from 1 million to 5 million won instantly, and the crowd, including Jake Myers and Erica, is ready to go to war for it. The bidding goes absolutely nuclear. 10 million, 30 million, 100 million won. The numbers are flying. Jake Myers screams out 200 million, looking desperate to secure the blade for his sister. But Erica isn't backing down. She calmly raises her paddle and bids 210 million without breaking a sweat. The auctioneer is loving the chaos, egging the crowd on to see if anyone has the guts to go higher. It turns into a petty battle. Jake hits 300 million and Erica immediately slaps him back with 310. Sehun looks at his own bank balance of barely 100,000 won and realizes he's watching the super rich play a different game. Suddenly, a voice from the back of the room shuts everyone up. 600 million. It's Aria Myers. Jake is terrified, remembering her order to buy the sword no matter the cost, and she clearly doesn't have time for a bidding war. The mood in the room turns red. Aria stands there like a whale appearing in a tiny pond, making everyone else feel insignificant. Jake hangs his head in shame, knowing he's probably in for a lecture, while Erika just sighs and gives up. The auctioneer can barely speak, his face sweating as he realizes a freshman's work just sold for a fortune. The hammer drops. Sold for 600 million won. Professor Kim looks on, probably thinking about the massive budget boost he's getting. Sehun checks his phone, and yup, the money is all there. Our boy is officially rich. Later, he meets up with Ryuun Ha in a private lounge. She's walking in like she owns the place. She asks what he's going to do with his new weapon, and Sehun tells her he's looking for a danger zone to test it out. Ryuun Ha smirks. She thinks it's a waste to just use a masterpiece like that for basic training. She suggests Unwall Mountain, the place where the first years are headed for their first subjunction practice. Sehun nods. He was already planning to go there, but for a very different reason. Ryuun Ha hesitates for a second, thinking about her own position, but Sehun knows exactly how to move her. He offers to make her whatever armament she wants as a gift, and suddenly her schedule is wide open for next week. Sehun smiles, but his internal monologue is cold. He's not going for the practice, he's going for a piece of history. He's thinking about Jürgen Kruger, a legendary necromancer and chairman of the world's biggest corporation. In the future, Jürgen lost a powerful artifact after being jumped by a demon, and that artifact is currently hidden somewhere in the depths of Unwall Mountain. Meanwhile, Jake Myers is standing in a massive office, looking like he's about to get executed. Aria is sitting there with a fake sweet smile, disappointed that her brother couldn't handle a simple auction purchase. Jake apologizes profusely, but Aria is already over it. She's already thinking about the next move. She knows Jake takes the same body control class as Sehun, and she tells him to find an opening to talk to him there. She dangles a carrot in front of him. If he handles this well, she'll talk to their father about his succession ceremony. But the threat is clear. If he fails, he's going to be replaced in the family rankings. Jake looks determined. He's a top student too, and he doesn't like being pushed around. He understands the mission. He has to get another weapon from Sehun by any means necessary. He's pumped up, telling himself he'll definitely get the sword, but deep down, he's sweating. Arya snaps at him for interrupting her while she's still talking, and Jake immediately reverts to a terrified little brother. She leans back, her eyes glowing with a dark ambition. "Bring it to me," she says. She doesn't care about the cost or the method. She just wants Sehun's talent under her thumb. Outside, Sehun is walking through the academy, calling Arya obnoxious. He can sense her gaze from miles away, but Arya just watches him go, her smile hiding a curiosity that's starting to border on obsession. Back at the technical hall, Sehun has finished his latest project. The short professor is practically vibrating with excitement. The system shows the result, the Crimson 1 spear and the Black 10 spear. They're high-grade weapons designed specifically to stabilize and boost flame wheels. The professor is floored. The craftsmanship is one thing, but the auxiliary formulas inside the spears are revolutionary. The spears are designed to warn the user by repelling mana if their technique is even slightly off. It's a training tool and a weapon in one. The old man gives him a perfect score, calling the spears a masterpiece that could be used as a textbook for other smiths. Sehun is officially exempt from attendance. He's too good for the class, and everyone knows it. The other students are complaining about their rotten luck for being in the same year as a monster like him. Sehun packs up his spears, and the professor even asks if he wants to sell them. Our boy is a hot commodity. He heads out to his next class, body control, with the old geezer Ma Guangsu. He opens the door to the gym and finds Jake Myers already inside, getting some early practice in. Jake tries to act casual, but you can tell he's been waiting for Sehun to show up. Sehun offers to leave and let him practice, but Jake stops him, his face getting all serious. Jake asks for a favor, and Sehun already knows where this is going. "No! I refuse." Sehun shuts him down before Jake can even finish his sentence. He bluntly tells Jake that he knows Arya sent him, and he has zero intention of being her personal smith. In his head, Sehun is playing it smart. He can't let Arya lose interest, but he also can't make her something mid-tier that would disappoint her. Jake isn't giving up. He reaches into his bag, pulling out something that makes Sehun's eyes widen. It's the Hammer of Black Flames. A hero-grade tool crafted from dragonite, designed to amplify both fire and dark attributes. Sehun admits it's a great item with plenty of room for improvement. It's exactly the kind of tool he needs. Jake offers a wager, one more spar. If Sehun loses, he has to make a weapon for Arya. Sehun's eye flashes. He agrees, but only if Jake adds one more condition. If Sehun wins, Jake isn't allowed to mention his sister's name for a whole month. Jake agrees. He's confident this time. He thinks he only lost before because he was caught off guard. He goes all out from the start, his hands glowing with a powerful blue light. He compresses his mana just by clenching his fists. This is the Myers style, and it's no joke. Sehun deactivates Erika's link and swaps to Ryu and Ha's Gluttony Iron. His body mana adjusts to its peak state instantly. Jake lunges, but Sehun is ready. He swings his spear with a force that creates a literal wind pressure in the room. Jake is surprised. Sehun handles the short spear like a veteran soldier, not a blacksmith. They clash in a blur of strikes, sparks flying every time their energy meets. Jake screams that he's not a pushover, pushing his formless sword style to the limit. He thinks the victory is his as he finds an opening, but a small flame sparks at the tip of Sehun's spear. The room goes dark for a split second as the fire begins to swirl. Jake freezes. He recognizes the pattern, but it shouldn't be possible for a first year to use it. It's the Flame Wheel Ember Spear. Sehun is channeling the ghost of his future friend, Samgyeon. Before he regressed, Sehun and Samgyeon were close. They shared drinks and stories of their lost world. They even shared secret techniques that had never been passed down to any living disciple. Samgyeon used to call Sehun pathetic and talentless, but those insults were just his way of pushing Sehun to be better. Sehun unleashes a crude imitation of the technique, the air screaming as his spears carve out a circle of fire. Jake is being dragged around the room, unable to find his rhythm against the overwhelming pressure. He realizes Sehun's physical stats are coming from a skill, and he thinks he can outlast him. He plans to stall until Sehun's buff wears off, thinking that's his only path to victory. Jake keeps his distance, playing it safe and waiting for Sehun to tire out. Sehun smirks. He knows Jake is stalling, and he's impressed by the guy's instincts, but he's already 3 steps ahead. He activates the explosive ring, using the mana he stored from Seonga inside his gravity bracelet. Jake is confused. He heard Sehun uses fire mana, but this dark, explosive energy is something else entirely. He has no choice but to use his ultimate move, the Myers-style Formless Sword Blue Axis. His hands move like light itself, a light thread of energy cutting through everything in its path. The blue beam shoots across the room, but Sehun just leans back, narrowly avoiding the lethal strike. Sehun is actually having fun. He admits Jake isn't bad, but it's time to end this. He enters the first revision of his flame wheel technique, the moon behind him turning a blood red. Eclipse Crescent! Sehun roars as he swings both spears in a massive, crushing arc. The collision is massive, blue and purple energy exploding in a shockwave that cracks the floor. The light is blinding, a pure struggle of power that leaves the room in a state of chaos. As the smoke clears, Jake is gasping for air, his formless sword completely shattered by the impact. Sehun stands over him, the tip of a spear resting right at Jake's throat. Jake finally admits defeat. The system pings. A new bond has been established with Jake Myers. Our boy just got a new hammer and a new subordinate. Sehun looks at Jake, totally unimpressed. He asks if Jake really considers their fight a draw, despite being pinned. Jake rubs the back of his neck, admitting that since he used a finisher and still didn't win, it's a total loss in his book. He curses his luck, whispering that things would have been different if he could actually use a sword. Sehun's interested now. Jake explains that for some reason, every time he grips a sword, the thing just snaps like a toothpick. Jake laughs it off, but he's actually broken hero-grade weapons before. Sehun just stares at him, realizing there's a deeper reason for this. Our boy's eyes light up. This isn't a curse, it's a rare physical trait that most smiths just aren't good enough to handle. Sehun tells him to relax his hand and stay still. He warns Jake that if he doesn't control his mana right now, he's going to get hurt. Sehun's eye glows a sharp orange as he prepares to test Jake's internal energy with a specialized tool. Jake panics as a massive surge of energy explodes from his palm. He's got no idea what Sehun is doing to him. Sehun sees it clearly now. The mana isn't just flowing, it's being crushed inward by Jake's own body. Jake is fuming, telling Sehun he should have explained the plan before trying to blow his hand off. Sehun just looks at him and asks a simple question. Do you want me to make you a sword? The system pings. Sehun is extracting a bond from Jake Myers, and their level is officially established. It's the compression stone. Jake's mana density is so high that regular metal can't contain it. Sehun promises him a blade that's literally impossible to break. Suddenly, Sehun senses a heavy presence. Someone much stronger has entered the room. It's Ma Guangsu. The air gets freezing cold as a new bond is formed with the veteran S-rank hero. Guangsu's eyes are sharp and full of suspicion. He hasn't forgotten how perfect Sehun's movements were during the spar. He tells Jake to beat it. He needs a private word with Sehun, and you can tell this isn't going to be a friendly chat. Guangsu lays it out. One day Sehun has the posture of a master blacksmith, and the next he's a seasoned spear god. He wants to know what Sehun really is. He crosses his arms, warning Sehun to answer carefully. He's already thinking the worst of our boy. Sehun plays it cool, acting flattered that his impeccable form is causing such a stir. He pulls out the social link stone, claiming his skill is just a trick that allows him to apply different physical profiles to his body. He explains that he just adjusts his muscles to copy someone else's movements, making it look like he's a master. He shows Guangsu how the effect fades away instantly, leaving him back in his weak freshman state. Guangsu is stunned. Sehun admits the skill has limits. It takes time to observe the target, and the physical strain on his body is massive. Guangsu mumbles to himself, processing the idea of observation and imitation. He actually apologizes for being so aggressive. He reveals there's a demon soldier with a similar ability, and it triggered a bad memory. Sehun knows exactly who he's talking about. The doppelganger, one of the most hated creatures from the future war. These things would mimic heroes just to mock them before ripping them apart. They're responsible for ending entire legendary bloodlines. Guangsu has a dark history with the doppelganger. He was once humiliated and nearly killed by one that copied his every move. You can see the rage and pain in his eyes. This is why he was so ready to kill Sehun if he turned out to be a monster. Sehun realizes that Guangsu either still suspects him or wants to use his copying skill to hunt the real doppelganger down. Either way, Sehun doesn't mind. If he's considered useful by an S-rank hero, that's just more resources for his forge. He tells Guangsu he'd have done the same thing, making the old man let out a huge, relieved laugh. Guangsu complains that modern heroes don't take demon threats seriously enough, finding a kindred spirit in Sehun's pragmatism. He smirks, telling Sehun he's going to have to completely rethink how he teaches the class now that he knows Sehun is a genius imitator. Sehun bows politely and heads out. Guangsu watches him go, thinking that with a little more work, this kid could be the top of the entire academy. But Guangsu's eyes linger on the door. There's still a tiny shred of doubt hidden behind his gaze. Sehun walks down the hallway, smirking. He successfully manipulated one of the strongest men on the planet. His phone rings. It's Yom Seong-ha. The mad dog is calling to settle his debt. Sehun tells him to relax, but Seong-ha feels uneasy not having paid him back for those god-tier spears yet. Sehun cuts to the chase. He asks if Seong-ha knows a mage from Babel named Louise Valente. Seong-ha has never heard of her. Sehun tells him to keep it quiet but find out exactly where she is and what she's doing. Seong-ha gets offended, asking if Sehun is underestimating his connections. Sehun just reminds him that he's basically a nobody at the Yeomwa gate right now. Sehun hangs up, wondering if a guy with such bad social skills can actually find Louise, the girl who becomes a literal living time bomb. In the future, Louise Valente is known as the Mad Bomber, a terrorist who levels cities. She wasn't always a villain though, she only turned bitter after a catastrophic injury. Sehun knows that if he hits the timing right, he can save her and gain a powerful ally. Seong-ha calls back almost instantly. He's already found her. Now that's what I call S-rank efficiency. Louise was the runner-up of elemental studies until her wand exploded during a spar, permanently damaging her mana circuits. Sehun stops in his tracks. The news of her condition hits him hard. He knows how much potential is being wasted. She's currently in a rehabilitation hospital in and so far, there's been zero improvement. Just then, Jake pops out from behind a pillar, still wanting to talk about his future sword. Sehun looks at him with a plan already forming in his head. He needs a way into that hospital without looking suspicious. He shows Jake a list of names, Kruger and Barmouth. They're high-ranking nobles with a very messy history of lawsuits and mana damage. Jake recognizes them immediately. They're part of the elite Noblesse Exchange Council and are related by marriage. Sehun makes the deal, investigate these two families, and he'll have Jake's unbreakable sword ready in just 1 week. Jake is thrilled. He'll do anything for a weapon that can handle his power. Sehun's face turns deadly serious. He tells Jake the first task is to break his arm. Jake is absolutely horrified. Sehun just smirks, telling him to make sure it's a nice clean break. This guy is truly insane. We're at General Hospital, Askis. It's a high-end facility for mages and heroes who've hit rock bottom. The doctors are gasping in frustration. Another experiment has failed, and their patient is at her breaking point. Louise Valente is clutching her chest, her breathing heavy and labored. She's been through this 100 times, and it never gets easier. It's her 159th attempt at rehabilitation. She's determined to force her mana to respond, no matter the cost. She screams out lava bullet, trying to manifest even a tiny spark of her old power. But as soon as the mana leaves her core, it backfires. A sharp explosion of pain hits her throat, cutting off her magic. She collapses, clutching her face in agony. The mana backflow is tearing her apart from the inside. The doctors rush in, calling for a mana freeze to stop the internal damage before it becomes permanent. The head professor sighs, telling them to stop the experiment and administer tranquilizers immediately. He's given up on her. Louise stumbles to her feet, begging for just one more chance. She's terrified that if they stop now, she'll never be a mage again. But the professor shakes his head. He's limiting her experiments to 50 times a day. He thinks she's just hurting herself now. He even tells her they're downgrading her magic to beginner level. That's the ultimate insult to a genius like her. She begs and pleads as the medical staff drags her away. She knows she can do it if they just give her a little more time. She's screaming now, her mana going wild as she fights against the nurses. She lets out one final roar of defiance, but it's no use. Her body is too weak to sustain the effort. She takes a sharp hit to the back of the neck, and the world starts to go dark. Hours later, the sun is shining through the hospital window, but Louise's world is still pitch black. She opens her eyes, her gaze hollow and empty. Every bit of her old fire has been snuffed out. She lets out a quiet curse. She's stuck in this bed, feeling like a complete failure. She regrets throwing a fit. She thinks she's blown her final chance with the doctors, and now she's truly alone. She tries to force herself out of bed. If the hospital won't help her, she'll find her own way to fix her circuits. She stumbles out into the hallway, her vision blurry. Suddenly, she slams right into someone. Bam! She clutches her nose, cursing out the bastard who wasn't looking where they were going. She looks up and sees Sehun. He's standing there in a patient gown with a sling on his arm, looking totally unbothered. Suddenly, a memory or a warning flashes through the air, an air raid alert. People are screaming as they run for cover. Dust and smoke fill the hallway. Someone is coughing, struggling to breathe in the chaos. A young man is leaning against the wall, his face covered in soot. He's barely survived whatever just exploded. He looks down the street at a figure walking away through the fog. He's furious, promising to never work with those bastards again. In the center of the destruction stands a girl in a gas mask. She's floating above the ground like an angel of death. She looks down at the terrified survivors with eyes that have seen way too much pain. The survivor realizes she's the mastermind behind the attack. Her power level is at least A-class, way beyond anything they can handle. She walks right past him, the silence between them heavier than the explosions. She stops and looks back through her mask, her gaze freezing him in place. "What are you looking at?" she asks. Back in the hospital hallway, Louise is staring at Sehun with that same cold gaze. "I said, what are you looking at?" She starts screaming at him, but as she gets more worked up, her mana backfires again. She collapses, her body shaking as she gasps for air. Sehun looks down at her with zero pity. He tells her that if she's sick, she should just stay in her room and lie down quietly. He offers to help her back, but she refuses. She's terrified of getting caught and being locked away forever. Sehun ignores her protests and starts walking, his footsteps steady on the hospital floor. He gets her back to her room and drops her onto the bed. He asks if she needs anything, his voice totally flat. Louise points to a drawer, telling him there's a black case inside. She's coughing uncontrollably now. Sehun hands it to her, telling her to hurry up and use it so he can leave. Louise is annoyed by how nosy he's being. She pulls out a mana inhaler and takes a deep hit. You can see the green mana flowing into her lungs, temporarily easing her pain. Sehun watches her carefully. His eyes narrow as he realizes what she's actually doing. He calls her out on her nonsense. He tells her that thing she just used isn't medicine, it's poison. He points at the inhaler, telling her it's actually making her throat and mana circuits worse every time she uses it. Louise freezes, her eyes widening in shock. How could a random patient with a broken arm possibly know the secret of her inhaler? Louise is staring him down, her eyes sharp with suspicion. She's lived a life of betrayal, so she demands he repeat himself, unable to process what he's hinting at. Sehun doesn't flinch. He looks her dead in the eye, confirming that his warning was exactly what it sounded like. He isn't playing games. Suddenly, the hospital intercom cuts through the tension. Cadet Lee Sehun is being called to the second-floor nurses' station immediately. Sehun takes that as his cue to leave, but Louise is stunned. She finally realizes who she's talking to, the famous freshman who's been making waves all over the academy. He confirms he's the one and only, but before he walks out, he drops a cold truth. He tells her if she doesn't want to end up mana impotent, she better toss that inhaler. Louise's face twists in rage as she tells him to get lost. She's had enough of blacksmith bastards messing with her life. Our boy Sehun just shrugs and walks out the door. He's planted the seed, now he just has to wait for it to grow. Left alone in the dark room, Louise curls into a ball, cursing every blacksmith in existence. To her, they're all the same, people who promise to help and only bring ruin. Outside, a blue system window pops up. Despite the insults, an affinity with Louise Valent has officially been established. Sehun stops in his tracks, looking a bit surprised. Even he didn't expect that a few harsh words would be enough to start a connection with someone as guarded as her. He heads to the doctor's office, where the professor is reviewing his charts. The doctor notes that everything seems to be looking up. The bone break was clean and it should be fully healed in about a week. Since there's no muscle or circuit damage, Sehun asks if he can be discharged right away. The doctor suggests he stays for one more week just to be safe. Sehun doesn't mind, he has a 2-week window to work his magic here. But he's on a clock. He needs to close the distance with Louise and find a way to fix her shattered mana circuits before time runs out. And the biggest obstacle? That mana corroder. He looks at the professor and casually asks if he knows Louise. He tells the doctor he saw her having a seizure in the hallway after trying to use magic. He's playing the role of the concerned student to perfection. Sehun acts like he's breaking a promise by tattling, making it seem like he's worried about her safety. The doctor looks concerned, falling for the act hook, line, and sinker. The doctor dismisses him, but as Sehun leaves, he has a tiny smirk on his face. Everything is going exactly according to plan. The next morning, the sun rises over the hospital, but Sehun is already busy making moves from his bed. He picks up his phone and dials a familiar name. It's time for an update from his man on the outside. Jake picks up, sounding a bit tired. Sehun gets straight to the point, asking if he found the information he was looking for. Jake confirms that something is definitely fishy. He starts by mentioning Bobble's Ivory Tower, an organization Sehun knows all too well. The Ivory Tower is a massive power structure that operates independently from the academy, fueled by powerful mages and graduates. Their influence over the students is absolute. especially when it comes to scholarships. Back then, a senior named Goetz was the top candidate for a major spot, but the only person standing in Goetz's way was Louise. Right before their duel, the weapon provided to Louise by the Barmut family exploded, ending her career. It's clear as day that Goetz and the Barmut family conspired to take Louise out, but Sehun is still wondering about the true source of that poisoned inhaler. He asks Jake if there's anything else that stands out about her situation. Jake mentions that while Louise's injury was severe, a professor named Charles from the elemental department has been personally supporting her ever since. On the surface, it sounds like a heartwarming story of a mentor helping a fallen student. But Sehun knows better. Something about this feels completely wrong. Before hanging up, Jake begs for a favor. He tells Sehun that the mad dog Seong-ha and Erica are giving him terrifying glares because they're worried about the MC. Sehun tells him he'll deal with it later and hangs up. He checks his texts with Seong-ha, who is being surprisingly obedient for now. Walking down the hospital corridor, Sehun realizes he doesn't even have Erika's number yet. He'll have to fix that once this mission is over. He reaches a door and gives it a firm knock. He's not here for a friendly visit, he's here to finish what he started yesterday. A voice from inside asks who it is. As soon as Sehun starts to answer, the door flies open and he's snatched inside. Louise slams him against the wall with surprising strength for someone so injured. She's fuming, and her face is inches from his. She calls him a son of a but stops herself. The rage in her eyes is enough to make a normal person crumble, but Sehun remains calm. Outside, crows fly off the roof as the sound of her screaming echoes through the quiet hospital halls. Sehun casually asks why she's suddenly throwing insults. Louise is near a breakdown, yelling that her entire life is going down the drain because of him. Flashback to the doctor's office. Because of Sehun's tattling, the doctor has ordered Louise to take 2 weeks of absolute rest and reset her rehab to level 1. She screams that she's been doing this grueling rehab for half a year, and now, because he poked his nose in, it's all for nothing. Sehun ignores her shouting and brings up the inhaler again. He tells her flat out, that monocrystal injury on her neck? He can fix it. Louise freezes. Her eyes widen in disbelief as she looks at him. It's the one thing everyone told her was impossible. She scoffs, asking if he even knows what a mana crystal injury is. It's an incurable disease that even the highest-ranking mages can't touch. She looks away, her voice low and bitter. She tells him she'll listen, just to see what kind of grand words he's going to use to lie to her. Sehun walks over to her cabinet and pulls out the inhaler. He asks her a simple question. Who exactly gave this to her? Louise hesitates, then admits a professor she trusts gave it to her. Sehun looks at the device and calls it what it really is, a mana corroder. Louise is confused by the word corrosion. Sehun decides that instead of explaining, he's just going to show her the truth. He activates his spirit-refining divine magic. He tells her to think of her mana circuits like an electrical system that was built for 110 volts, that inhaler, it's been upgrading only the circuits in her neck to 220 volts. Her golden eyes reflect the sudden realization of what he's implying. A massive clash occurs between the different voltages. Eventually, an overload happens, making it physically impossible for her to use mana at all. Louise clutches her neck as the pain flares up. She realizes that the medicine she's been taking was actually the thing killing her potential. She remembers the day Professor Charles handed her the black box, telling her it would be effective for her wound. Back then, she was so desperate and grateful. She had bowed her head and thanked him, thinking he was her only savior. She remembers him placing a hand on her shoulder, his voice sounding so kind and fatherly. He had told her she could overcome any pain and to never give up. It was all a lie, a performance to keep her under his thumb. Louise had smiled back then, promising to keep his words in mind. The betrayal is hitting her like a freight train. She looks at Sehun, the reality sinking in. Professor Charles wasn't helping her. He was playing with her, treating her like a broken toy. Her expression turns from heartbreak to pure, unadulterated cold fury. She grits her teeth, vowing that she will definitely pay him back for what he's done.